Malicious Empress. During the early summer when evening falls, there will always be sudden, torrential rains. The skies were overcast and the dark clouds were suppressing the dignified atmosphere of the palace. The formerly magnificent palace hall was shrouded by the clouds, as if it was a huge cage, trapping the people inside firmly. In the large chambers, the curtains seemed old as they were covered with a thick layer of dust. The weather originally was hot, but one actually felt a little cold inside. Clothes and jewelry were scattered all over the floor, as if some calamity had just occurred. A female was half kneeling on the ground, looking at the person in front. This female was only in her 30s, but her face was already like that of an old woman. There was deep hostility between her brows and her eyes were as dead as stagnant water, seemingly unable to tear like a long-dried well but filled with a bottomless hatred. Your ladyship, please. The eunuch beside her had a bolt of white silk in his hands and his tone could not hide his impatience. Zha still needs to report back to his majesty upon completion. Shen Miao's eyes landed on the eunuch. She remained silent for a long time before slowly speaking with a hoarse voice. Xiao Li Zi, when Ben Gong promoted you at that time, you were still a dog beside Gao Gong Gong. The eunuch slightly raised his head arrogantly. Your ladyship, the present is different from the past. The present is different from the past, Shen Miao muttered before suddenly raising her head for a laugh. What a good the present is different from the past. Because of one sentence, the present is different from the past, all the servants and courtiers who had previously seen her would be respectful and let her order them around. Because of this the present is different from the past, she ended up with 3 kai of white silk to end her life. What kind of past is the past and when did the present become the present? Was it starting from when Mei Fern entered the palace, from when the crown prince was deposed, or when Princess Wan Yu died tragically on her long journey for an alliance marriage? Or was it when she came back to the palace after being a Qin hostage 5 years ago? From the past to the present, from an empress to a deposed empress, it was all because of Fu Shuyi's one word. This entire court of officials changed their positions and this Ming Qi reversed black and white. What a good the present is different from the past. The doors of the hall creaked open and a pair of dragon-embroidered boots stopped in front of Shen Miao. Looking up, her eyes were met with a bright yellow robe. Seeing that you have followed Zhen for 20 years, Zhen will grant you an intact corpse. Thank this kindness, the emperor said. Shen Miao slowly raised her head and looked at the man that was standing tall above. Time did not leave any imprint on his face as he was as handsome as he was in the beginning. He was the wise sovereign and justifiably the son of heaven. He was the man that she had foolishly loved for 20 years and the husband that she helped in humble circumstances over the years. Now he said to her, Zhen will grant you an intact corpse. Thank this kindness. Why? Shen Miao asked with difficulty. He did not reply. Why the need to eliminate the entire Shen family? She asked. Prince Ding, Fu Shuyi, was one of the 9 sons of the late emperor. Each of the 9 sons had their own merits but the crown prince was sickly and the emperor was not willing to alter the title of the crown prince, thus the princess took the turmoil as an opportunity. She had long fallen for Prince Ding's peerless talent and regardless of her family's persuasion, she finally got one she wanted, but also firmly tied the entire Shen family together with Prince Ding. Because of that, she dedicated herself to assisting Prince Ding, changing from a pampered daughter who did not know anything to a prince consort who could participate in court, come up with plans, give advice and also stabilize the country. On the day that Fu Shuyi ascended the throne, he established her as the empress, the mother to the world. She thought that she was the grandest empress. When the prince's rebellion was quelled, the Xiaonu attacked, putting the neighboring countries at risk. In order to borrow troops, Shen Miao voluntarily went to the Qin country as a hostage. When she left, her children were not even a full month. But Fu Shuyi had said, Zhen will personally bring you back. 5 years later, she finally could return back to Mingqi, but there was an additional beautiful and talented Mei Fern in the inner palace. Mei Fern was an official's daughter that Fu Shuyi had met during his expedition to the east. He liked her intelligence and sensibility and thus brought her back to the palace. Mei Fern gave birth to Prince Fu Chen who was much favored. Conversely, Shen Miao's son, the crown prince Fu Ming, was not favored at all. Fu Shuyi once said, in the presence of the entire court, Fu Ming's character is too soft, Fu Cheng is still the one who resembles me the most. His words clearly indicated his intention to change the title of the crown prince. As Mei Fern made Shen Miao feel a sense of crisis, they fought in the palace for 10 years. Mei Fern had repeatedly gotten the upper hand to the point that she even urged Fu Shuyi to marry her daughter, Princess Wan Yu, to the Xiongnu as a marriage alliance. The Xiongnu were very aggressive and Princess Wan Yu was immediately cremated after dying from an illness on the marriage journey. Everyone knew the matter was strange, but as a mother, Shen Miao had no alternatives. At the end, she had walked to where she was. Fu Shuyi's one decree of, the Shen family revolted, the crown prince was deposed and he had committed suicide to atone for his offenses. She as an empress would also be deposed and 3 kai of white silk bestowed. She only wanted to ask one question, why? Shen Miao reasoned, Fu Shuyi, do you have no conscience? You and I have been husband and wife for more than 20 years and I had not done anything to let you down. When you first ascended to the throne, it was my Shen family that helped you. When you went into battle and the Xiongnu came to invade, I was the one to help you write the letter of surrender. When you wanted to draw the high-ranking officials to your side, it was me who got on my knees to beg them to assist. I went to Qin country as a hostage and suffered torture and pain and how did you reciprocate? When Mei Fern suggested a marriage for Wan Yu, you drafted the imperial decree. Wan Yu was only 16 when she died. The entire court was aware that you favored Fu Cheng while neglecting Fu Ming and now you exterminate my entire clan. Now that death is near at hand, I will ask you one question. Why? Shen Miao. Fu Shuyi frowned, but there was not the slightest change in expression, as if he was a cold statue. When Imperial Father was around, he had already wanted to deal with several big families. Shen family had accomplishments that could cover the masters, so they could not remain for long. It was Zhen who persuaded Imperial Father. Zhen let the Shen family survive for 20 years. This is already the biggest bestowment to the Shen family. Already the biggest bestowment to the Shen family. Shen Miao's entire body shook. These days she had cried so much that her tears no longer flowed. She faced Fu Shuyi and said slowly, why keep the Shen family? It was not because of your kindness and not because of your bestowment. You only wanted to make use of the Shen family military power to fight with your D brothers. After the cunning hare dies, the hounds are boiled. Now that the country is settled, you destroy the bridge after crossing the river. Fu Shuyi, you are so heartless. Shen Miao. Fu Shuyi shouted angrily as if he was stabbed in his sore spot. He then coldly scoffed, make the best of it then. Finished speaking, he walked out. Shen Miao crouched on the floor as she clenched her fists. This was the man that she had loved her entire life. She fought for his favor with Mei Fern and only found out at the end that it was not fighting for favor. This man's heart was never been with her at all. All the words of love were simply an amusing play, a big joke. She spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. Older sister, what is this? You look awful, a sweet voice sounded. The female wore a light yellow robe with a hibiscus sewn in front over a willow waist, like a fairy from heavens. Her actions were very graceful and moving as she approached. This was Mei Fern, who had the winning hand and fought with Shen Miao for her entire life in the palace. Behind Mei Fern there stood 2 women dressed in the palace's robes. Shen Miao was surprised for a moment, Shen Qing, Shen Yu. This was the second and third household, second uncles and third uncle's daughters, her 2 older Tang sisters. Why were they in the palace? His Majesty summoned his sisters into the palace. Shen Yu covered her lips as she smiled. 5th younger sister need not be shocked. Previously, 5th younger sister loved to help his sisters to match make, now it will no longer be needed. His Majesty treats his sisters very well. Shen Miao's heart was like overturning seas and rivers as, with lightning speed, she seemed to have understood something that she had never considered before. Her voice sounded incredulous as she said, You both have been delaying your marriage all for this day. That is exactly the way it is. Shen Qing took a step forward. At the beginning, His Majesty had reached an agreement with my father and third uncle. As long as they are able to make you marry His Majesty, in time, as sisters would have the same place to go to. In the beginning, when Shen Miao was able to marry Fu Shuyi, the second and third households also put in a lot of effort. Thinking back now, when she first fell in love with Fu Shuyi, it was second and third aunt who kept mentioning that Prince Ding was a talented youth which made her feelings sprout. So it was actually an agreement that was set up much earlier. So it was actually the second and third households that had hidden their evil hearts and waited for everything to occur today. Shen Qing was afraid that Shen Miao did not understand and continued, His Majesty is so capable and handsome and we sisters have long admired him. Unfortunately, only first uncle had power in his hands and could force 5th younger sister to climb up first. 5th younger sister has lived a fortunate life for many years before, now our hour has come. Shen Miao suddenly straightened up and voiced out, His Majesty sees the entire Shen family but let both of you enter the palace. How are the second and third households safe and sound? Of course the second and third household would be safe and sound. Shen Yu covered her mouth as she laughed, because we have done a great service. The evidence of eldest uncle's rebellion was presented by our household so as to place righteousness before family. 5th younger sister, in return, His Majesty bestowed high-ranking titles to our 2 households. Shen Miao looked at her own 2 Tangjis in shock and said, Are all of you crazy? When the nest overturns, will any eggs remain intact? The Shen family is one big family. Fu Shuyi wants to deal with the Shen family but you all actually frame your own family members. Family members. 5th younger sister, we do not acknowledge the first household as our own family. Shen Qing laughed coldly, moreover, you have enjoyed too much already. Now that the crown prince has died, the princess is no longer here and the Shen family is destroyed, you should leave earlier for the underworld and reunite with them. Mei Fern leisurely came forward and smiled brightly, older sister, the country is stabilized, you should retire. In the end, after fighting for 10 years, Shen Miao lost too tragically, and her life was now in shambles. Lost till her clan had perished and she needed to mourn for her children. Lost till she became a laughingstock to the world. Her daughter who had met with a violent death, the crown prince who was deposed, the Shen family who had sacrificed themselves for the country, not one of them was lucky enough to escape. In one dynasty, everything was overturned. She bitterly stated, Ben Gong will not die as, after all, one is still a consort. Chen Gong Gong, start now. Mei Fern gave a look to the eunuch. The plump eunuch immediately took a few steps forward and used one hand to tightly grasp Shen Miao's neck while he used the other hand to wrap the white silk around it. With a forceful pull, the white silk made a crisp sound against bone as it tore through the flesh. The female struggling on the floor stared up with large eyes, laying a poisonous vow in her heart. Her son, her daughter, her parents, brothers, sisters, servants. Everyone in her Shen family was harmed. Fu Shuyi, Mei Fern, Shen Qing, Shen Yu, all the people who harmed her and harmed her loved ones, if there was an afterlife, a debt of blood must be paid in blood. It's the time to mourn as everything between you and me is dead. In the large black and white courtyard, the floors were slabs of limestone, the pillars were vermilion red and there were complicated begonia patterns engraved on the railings. After an entire night of rain, the raindrops slipped down the leaves and onto the ground. The purple gold incense burner was made exquisitely like small animal and was currently emitting costus root scent which smelled exceptionally fresh in the early autumn. In each corner of the bed, small, brightly colored tassel sachets of fragrance were hung. By the side of the couch, 2 tall maids were carefully fanning the person on the bed. The fever should be serious as one fell into the water in such a cold weather. Young lady had been sleeping for a day and night and the physician said that she should be awake by now. Why is there still no movement? The green-clad maid's face could hardly conceal her anxiety. Gu Yu, it's almost been half a shichen. Why has the doctor not arrived yet? The other maid clad in purple asked. The second mistress was looking on closely and this is considered a shameful matter so the residence is concealing the matter. Gu Yu looked at the person on the bed. Fern and master are not in the capital and eldest young master is likewise not in. Old Fern is also biased towards the east courtyard. Seeing that Bai Lu and Shuangzhong have yet to return after looking for a physician, it must be that they were stopped. Isn't this as good as pushing young lady onto the road towards her death? This cannot be done. I have to go out and see. As the words were spoken, the person on the bed who was listening moaned in a weak voice. Young lady is awake. The purple-clad maid called out in surprise, quickly running to the bedside to see the young female rubbing her forehead as she slowly sat up. Jing Jie, Shen Miao mumbled. This servant is here. The maid in purple smiled as she held Shen Miao's hand. Is lady feeling better? After sleeping for a day and night, it seemed that the fever had subsided but one still did not wake. This servant was thinking of calling a physician over again. Does young lady want some water? Gu Yu handed a cup of tea over. Shen Miao looked somewhat puzzled at the 2 before her. She had 4 first-rank maids, Jing Jie, Gu Yu, Bai Lu and Shuangzhong. They were all very intelligent and quick-witted girls. Unfortunately, not one was left in the end. When she was a hostage in Qin, in order to protect her from being humiliated by the crown prince, Gu Yu died at the hands of the crown prince of Qin. With Bai Lu and Shuangzhong, one died along with Wan Yu on the marriage journey, another died in the fight for favor with Mei Fern in the inner palace. As for Jing Jie, she was the prettiest of them. In the beginning, in order to help Fu Shuyi ascend to the throne and win over the officials, Jing Jie volunteered to be a concubine, using her beauty to lure the officials' support. In the end, she was killed by the official's wife with a random reason. After learning of the death of Jing Jie, Shen Miao cried so much she almost had a miscarriage. Now, seeing Jing Jie standing in front of her with her usual beautiful self and Gu Yu smiling at her, both maids at the tender age of 14 or 15, put Shen Miao in a momentary trance. After a moment, she bitterly smiled and closed her eyes. The illusion one saw before death was just so real. What is young lady saying? Gu Yu put the cup aside and touched Shen Miao's forehead. Has the fever confused you? Feeling the ice-cold hand that touched her forehead was both comfortable and real, Shen Miao suddenly opened her eyes and her gaze sharpened. She slowly lowered her head and looked at her own hands. They were fair and delicate, with neatly trimmed nails. One could see that it was a pair of pampered hands as they were smooth and adorable. These were not her hands. Her hands were already becoming rough when dealing with the matters of the court with Fu Shuyi. She copied every account book, was like a servant who was bossed around in Qin country, battled in the inner palace for the sake of Fu Ming and Wan Yu and washed clothes in the cold palace until her hands were filled with calluses and her joints were swelling. How could they have such a delicate appearance? Bring me a mirror, Shen Miao said. While her voice was still very weak, her tone was firm. Gu Yu and Jing Jie looked at one another in dismay. In the end, Jing Jie brought a mirror out and handed it over to Shen Miao. In the bronze mirror, the young lady's face was round with a full forehead, a pair of large almond eyes that were slightly red, a rounded nose and a small mouth. It was still a childlike face and was not very beautiful, but it was lovely and refreshing and had a well-behaved, shy appearance. This was the face that the royal family praised for being one that could bring fortune to one's husband. A clear and sharp sound rang out as the mirror suddenly landed on the floor. The sound of the shards resonated in her heart, setting off large stormy waves. She pinched herself ferociously and 2 tears fell. The heavens did not turn its back on people. The heavens did not turn its back on her. She had returned. Gu Yu and Jing Jie jumped in fright. Gu Yu quickly went to pick up the pieces on the floor and anxiously said, "Young lady must be careful not to hurt one's legs." "Why is young lady crying?" Jing Jie wiped Shen Miao with a handkerchief but saw that Shen Miao had a strange look as she mumbled, "I have returned back." She grabbed Jing Jie asking, "What year is it?" Jing Jie was somewhat afraid but replied honestly, 68th year of Ming-Chi. "What is wrong with young lady? Is any part of the body unwell?" 68th year of Ming-Chi, 68th year of Ming-Chi, Shen Miao eyes widened. She was 14 in the 68th year of Ming-Chi. It was then that she came upon Fu Shuyi and fell so foolishly in love that she forced her father to marry her off. It's the year when she forced Fu Shuyi to marry her. And now, she heard Gu Yu's words by her ear, "Young lady shouldn't scare servants. The fever has just subsided a little, it could be that one's mind is still unclear. Eldest young lady is really too vicious, this is practically calling for young lady's life." In the past lifetime, Shen Miao was usually by Fu Shuyi's side, running tasks for him, and the days in Shen residence were completely bland. But, she could remember this event distinctly. She could remember everything related to Fu Shuyi clearly. Shen Qing told her that Fu Shuyi wanted to come to Shen residence to visit 2nd and 3rd Shu, so she pulled her over to secretly look. However, upon reaching the garden, Shen Qing pushed her down from the rock garden. Due to other officials being around when she was fished out from the pond, Shen Miao was seen as a joke. Her obsession with Prince Ding for the past half of the year had been spread throughout the capital and, with this incident, she became a laughingstock. In her previous life, after she woke up, she accused Shen Qing of pushing her into the pond, but no one believed her. Shen Miao suffered grievances and was punished by Old Fern to be confined in the temple and was only allowed out after the Mid-Autumn Festival. Shen Yu had secretly let her out and brought her to the Yanbei Hall's Chrysanthemum Appreciation Feast where she committed many blunders. Shen Miao closed her eyes. There were 3 households in the Shen family where Shen Qin headed the first household. He was Shen Miao's father and was the son of old General Shen and his Yuanpei Fern aka the original official wife. The Yuanpei died during her middle age so old General Shen married a second wife and she gave birth to Shen Gui from the second household and Shen Wan from the third household. After old General Shen died, the second wife became the current Old Fern. The Shen family were not separated and all 3 brothers supported one another mutually with such good relationships that this became an anecdote. The Shen family had a military lineage but upon reaching Shen Qin's generation, other than the first household who held some military power, the second and third household took the route of civil officials. Shen Qin was often away for military expeditions while Shen Fern followed with her husband's army. Shen Miao was left in Shen residence under the care and teachings of Old Fern and the 2 Shen Qins. After teaching this and instructing that, she did not get anywhere and was still an ignorant and incompetent straw bag that would stick to the man she met shamelessly. In the last life, she only felt that her aunts and Old Fern treated her particularly well and it was only Shen Yu and Shen Qing who needed to learn rules and etiquette, not her. Now, it seemed that it was a plan to cause her to fail badly due to their excessive praise. Bullying her because her parents and older brother were not at her side and showing one side in front while showing another side when backs were turned, this let Shen Qin and Shen Fern feel that this daughter was even more like a straw bag each time they returned to the residence. This time, she would like to see how these people would shamelessly repeat the same old tricks. Just as she was thinking this, she heard the girl who was outside sweeping the yard run and saying, "Young lady, second young lady is here to see you. Young lady, second young lady is here to see you." Jing Jie's face showed her worries, to come at such a time. Young lady's health is not well and one fears her catching the cold. Gu Yu tugged at Jing Jie's arm, but she also had a worried look. Shen Miao saw the worry in their eyes and sighed in her heart. The 4 maids beside her were all personally selected and trained by Shen Qin and Shen Fern and were thus very clever and loyal. What kind of situation the Shen family was in, what intentions the second and third households were hiding, her maids were able to deduce, but she was young and could not see. Before anything could be said, a young female walked in from outside. This female looked just over 15 or 16 and was clad in a pale pink, daisy-patterned dress with a pleated skirt and her hair was combed to a fringed bun. Her complexion was fair and her brows and eyes were beautifully elegant. She had a thick atmosphere of an educated appearance and was dignified and decently conducted. Upon seeing Shen Miao, she quickened her steps to the bed and spoke anxiously, "Fifth younger sister, is your health better? After knowing that you had fallen into the water, I was worried for a long time, but Jiao Courtyard's people said that you needed to rest and I dared not disturb you. Hearing that you were awake today, I then dared to come over." Shen Miao looked at the young female in front. It was Shen Yu from the third household of the Shen family. There were 3 daughters of the Shen family. Shen Qing was easygoing and magnanimous, Shen Yu was famous for her talents, while it was only Shen Miao who had a disposition like a wooden block and lacked talent. Outsiders usually praised her as virtuous and quiet but in fact they knew that there was no merit to it and that she was a daughter that could not be shown in public. Previously, before Shen Miao was married off, she had the best relationship with Shen Yu. Shen Yu had a gentle temperament and could come up with ideas for Shen Miao many times. It was just that, at the beginning, Shen Miao was unable to see if the intention was good or bad and was blindly grateful to this Tang Jia for her help and dedication. For Shen Yu to come at this time, it was most likely to plead for Shen Qing. As expected, Shen Yu opened her mouth and said, "Fifth younger sister, eldest sister made a slip and erred." Since the matter had come to this point, one hoped that fifth younger sister would be able to forgive her this time. Hearing that fifth sister had a fever, eldest sister was so remorseful. Since fifth sister's injuries are better, why not spare eldest sister this time? She did not deliberately let you make a fool out of yourself in front of His Highness Prince Ding. It would still have been alright if that sentence was not spoken, but she had to mention Prince Ding in front of Shen Miao. Everyone knew that Prince Ding was Shen Miao's beloved. Shen Miao had the temperament to take grievances made onto her except for when it came to Prince Ding, then she would definitely not retreat a step back. If Prince Ding was not mentioned, in all likelihood Shen Miao would let the matter rest, but this time Shen Yu deliberately mentioned him. If she was not provoking a dispute between her and Shen Qing, what else could it be? In the last lifetime, it was also the same. She only just woke up when Shen Yu quickly rushed over to plead for Shen Qing and this plea agitated Shen Miao. The person with a normally agreeable nature then accused Shen Qing of pushing her into the water before her sweetheart in front of Old Fern. But Shen Qing did not admit to it and the people nearby did not see Shen Qing pushing Shen Miao. Old Fern had always been biased towards the second and third household and naturally gave her a lesson of not knowing how to cherish one's good name due to one's young age yet still accused one's elder sister and confined her as punishment. After this matter was spread to Guang Wen Tang, Shen Miao became the laughing stock of the students and no longer attended classes. And much later, she gradually faded out of the circle of the capital's noble ladies. Thinking about it now, her vision had always been confined by these people in the general's residence who created an illusion of the world. She had thought that she was virtuous and respectable and did not know that in the eyes of outsiders, she was seen as weak and ignorant. She thought that loving Prince Ding was brave and courageous but did not know that strangers viewed her as shameless. The result of these deliberate teachings had led her to a muddled impression in the beginning. Although she succeeded in marrying Fu Shuyi, she was considered as one who was unable to be presented to the public, and when everyone compared her with Mei Furen, they would only say that she was stupid and ignorant. What a stupid past. Shen Yu saw anxiety crossing Shen Miao's forehead and her lips quietly revealed a trace of a smile. She knew that based on Shen Miao's temperament, as long as one mentioned Fu Shuyi, she would definitely feel rage. But after waiting for a long time for a reaction that was yet unseen, Shen Yu looked over suspiciously over to see the young female looking at her with a smile. The young female's face was still very pale and her lips were very dry, but her dark eyes were fresh and full of life like grapes. Shen Miao's eyes were her best feature. Large almond-shaped eyes, ignorant and confused like a newborn puppy. It was just that, normally, she would look stiff and dull. Now that pair of almond eyes were still round, but the expressions in her eyes were very different. It revealed some cold, unfeeling intentions. It was not stiff but more like a condescending look. Shen Yu quivered. She did not know why, but there was a kind of unspeakable panic in her heart. It seemed that the one she was facing was not a stupid and dumb goose but a noble person. How could there be such a feeling? Of course she could not know that the Shen Miao before her was no longer the Shen Miao from before. This Shen Miao had experienced the fight for imperial position, rivalry of favor, loss of favor, the mourning of her children and death of her entire clan. She was in charge of the inner palace and had the supreme power over the 6 palaces. She was the Empress Shen of Mingqi. Shen Yu froze for a long time until the young female in front rubbed her forehead and whispered, "Second elder sister's words are too serious. It was I who fell in by myself." Fifth younger sister, Shen Yu did not expect that Shen Miao would say that and was stunned for a moment before she could react. She shook her head and said, "Fifth younger sister must not feel any grievance." "Why would I feel grievance?" Shen Miao smiled as she interrupted her words. "It was only a trifling matter. One's head is still feeling dizzy and one would like to rest for a while. If there are any other matters, then it will be discussed at Zumu's place." With such words having been said, Shen Yu was unable to say any more. Even though she felt strange that Shen Miao did not treat her warmly, it could also be that Shen Miao was unhappy because she was made to look like a fool in front of Fu Shuyi. After saying a few more words, Shen Yu then simply left. After Shen Yu was gone, Gu Yu then said, "Our young lady was pushed into the water and almost lost her life. If she is here to plead on behalf of eldest young lady, then just plead." Why does it seem that this was not the case? Gu Yu was vaguely warning Shen Miao that Shen Yu did not have any good intentions. When the sandpiper and clam fight with one another, the fisherman benefits. She most likely wants to be that fisherman, Shen Miao lightly said. Gu Yu was surprised and happy that Shen Miao could finally see the true face of Shen Yu, but she could not really understand the meaning behind Shen Miao's words. She looked up and saw a cold smile on her young lady's face. It created an inexplicable sense of awe which made people stare involuntarily. Shen Miao looked at her fingertips. Why did Shen Qing push her into the water? It was because she said this sentence at that time, during the new year, when father comes back in triumph, I will let father call the shots and beg for him to marry me off to His Highness Prince Ding. She had really said it naively and felt that they were all one family, so there was no need for any scruples. Shen Qin was a great general in the imperial court, therefore, if he was determined to marry his daughter off, nothing was impossible. Why would Shen Yu incite disharmony between her and Shen Qing? Naturally it was because Shen Yu also loved Prince Ding. In her past life, Shen Yu and Shen Qing only told her at the end of her life that they had both loved Fu Shuyi for a long time. Thinking about it now, it had begun to take shape at this moment. Since both sisters harbored a crush on Fu Shuyi, wouldn't it be a pity if they were not able to attain their wish this lifetime? She will definitely let their wishes come true. Second and third households' blood debt to the entire Shen family would be repaid from this moment onwards. In the early autumn, the geese from the north lined up as they flew across the sky towards the warmer south. The lush summer foliage in the courtyard had begun to wither in autumn and the colored fishes in the pond looked much calmer than usual. The young female's ink black hair was combed into a deer bun and secured by a delicate coral hairpin as she wore a dark red outfit with clouds and geese embroidery, bringing out her slim and exquisite body. Bai Lu draped the embroidered cloak gently over Shen Miao's body and said, "Young lady's health has yet to recover and one must be careful not to catch a cold." Shen Miao shook her head. Her stature was still small and she was not as tall as Shen Yu and Shen Qing. Her face was also rounded and, combined with her usual cowardly characteristics, she seemed to be a few years younger than her actual age, just reaching 11 or 12 years old. But today she was somewhat different. Zhang watched by the side and felt slightly peculiar in her heart. The young female's complexion was fair and she was small and petite, without even a smile on her face. She did not look cold or foolish but was somewhat indifferent and one could feel some sense of yearning as she gazed into the skies. She was standing like before but gave off a slightly dignified feeling, like she had gained a unique air overnight and there was a sense of grace in the atmosphere. Zhang shook her head as if she could wipe the absurd thought from her mind. She smiled and looked towards Shen Miao. What is young lady looking at? After having her breakfast, Shen Miao stood at the courtyard staring at the sky in a trance. Was just wondering if these wild geese that fly from the north to the south would pass by the northwest desert. Shen Miao softly said. The northwest desert was the region where Shen Qin was guarding and also where Shen Furen and eldest Shen Young Master were at. Last month when they wrote back, the capital had just turned colder but already all kinds of trees were withered and a little snow was forming. Young lady is missing Master and Furen. Zhang smiled. Master will return at the end of the year and will be so happy to see that young lady has grown taller again. Shen Miao smiled with a trace of bitterness at the corners of her lips. The great general could only return once a year and upon his return, the first thing he faced was that his own daughter did not know shame and was made a joke by rushing to be a wife herself and forcing a marriage upon others. How happy could he be? Not to mention the one that she was obsessed with was a vile person who only wanted to use the Shen family army to fight for the throne. The fight for the throne was a messy affair that the Shen family was not willing to interfere in but unfortunately they were dragged into it by her blind love which led to the destruction of the entire clan. Shen Miao closed her eyes. It was just a short time of half a year, but it was long enough for so many things to happen. Once she reached marriageable age, her marriage had become a matter that the East Courtyard could use against her as leverage. It seemingly started from this year that the East Courtyard removed the disguise to show the evil beast beneath and forced her step by step to a dead end, until she was unable to return. Young lady, young lady. Bai Lu saw that little mistress's expression was not right as she clutched the cake so tightly that her fingers had turned white, so she softly called out. Shen Miao recovered to her senses and saw Gu Yu jogging over. Young lady, Rong Jingtang has come over to hasten. Rong Jingtang was where old Shen Furen stayed. Early in the morning, a maid by old Furen's side came over to see Shen Miao. When she saw that Shen Miao was unhindered, she said to go over to old Furen's to perform her greetings when her health was better. Was it in fact a greeting, or was it to condemn Shen Miao with more people at her side, who wasn't aware of it? Shen Miao lightly smiled and tightened her cloak before saying, let's go. In the Shen residence, the east and west courtyards were entirely different. When old General Shen was still alive, he would often practice his swordplay and boxing in an empty yard in the west courtyard. After old General Shen died, Shen Gui and Shen Wan took the route of literary officials and only Shen Xin took up the old general's mantle, thus the empty yard together with the west courtyard was given to Shen Xin. The east courtyard was spacious and the second and third household stayed there with old Shen Furen. In actual fact, the location of the west courtyard as compared to the east courtyard was much further away and the sun was not very adequate, only half of what the east courtyard would have, and thus was not a place worthy of praise. Only Shen Xin was happy about it, as if getting that piece of empty land was like getting a heaven worthy of advantage. Considering that Shen Xin and Shen Furen came from military lineage, their way of looking at things was uncomplicated. So the white walls, black tiles and surroundings were extremely simple, which could not compare to the delicate and graceful restored east courtyard. That is why Shen Miao felt very dissatisfied with her family's west courtyard and was envious of the elegance and adorableness of the east courtyard, and because of it, she complained about Shen Xin in her heart. Now looking at it, she found her ignorance ridiculous. Their own courtyard, though plain, was not lacking in anything. It displayed tolerance and open-mindedness, so how could it compare to the monsters and demons in the east courtyard? That courtyard was adorned with gold and jade on the outside but foul in the inside. After walking through the long corridor and passing the exquisitely trimmed garden, they then reached the main doors of Rong Jingtang. Most likely it was to highlight the ambience of a literary background, but Rong Jingtang's layout was especially elegant. There was a bamboo plaque hung on the door and the bronze crane carvings on the handles were very detailed and lively. Fifth young lady is here, Shier, who was beside old Shen Furen, called out. Shen Miao took a step into Rong Jingtang. Rong Jingtang was the picture of a joyous and harmonious scene and almost everyone was in attendance. The second Furen of the Shen family, Ren Wanyan, and the third Furen of the Shen family, Chen Ruochu, were seated below old Furen. Shen Qing sat beside old Furen, holding a plate of snacks, and seated the other side was the little brother from the second household of the Shen family, Shen Yuanbo. Shen Yuanbo was only 5 years old and was casually grabbing any snack to put into old Furen's mouth, making old Furen laugh until she bent backwards. It seemed that no one noticed Shen Miao's appearance until Shen Yu smiled and said, why is fifth younger sister only here now? Seventh younger brother has almost finished the sweet steam milk pastries. Shen Miao nodded her head, most likely my body has yet to fully recover. I was late because I felt dizzy after taking a couple of steps and rested by the pathway for a moment. The people of Rong Jingtang were silent. Shen Yu wanted to say that she purposely came late, so Shen Miao was not afraid to point out that old Shen Furen took advantage of her old age and did not care about her granddaughter's health, insisting on her coming over for her greetings. After a while, Ren Wanyan smiled. I see that little Five's body is really weak. The physician has been invited twice in these past few days, so it is fortunate that it is no longer a problem now. Is your health better? A hoarse voice sounded with a trace of impatience that was not easy to detect. Shen Miao looked up towards old Shen Furen. Old Shen Furen had already tucked away the smile on her face and had a haughty expression on. She was obviously 70 years of age, but she still wore a peach red, collared button top over a tight and thin skirt. There was a green jade necklace on her neck and she carried an embroidered pouch, while her silver hair was styled into a cloud-like bun that was dotted with some jade beads. She was a female who was very particular about appearances. In her last lifetime, during Shen Miao's time in the women's chambers, she always felt that old Shen Furen was the most noble of women, the type that was still elegant even in her later years. That air of elegance fascinated her once, but now she found that it somewhat ridiculous. Old General Shen's Yuan Pei, Shen Xin's mother, was from a prestigious household and was a genuine lady from a noble house who unfortunately died at middle age. Afterwards, old General Shen saved a songstress from a local ruffian when his army marched through some place. Seeing that the songstress had nowhere to go and was earnestly requesting to serve as a concubine, he brought her back. She then gave birth to Shen Gui and Shen Wan for the old general, elevating her status. A songstress that broke clear of all hardships, becoming Shen Furen and, afterwards, old Shen Furen. Her reputation and status had changed, but in her bones, she was still a person with vile features that came from the streets. That did not change at all. Shen Miao still remembered that in her previous lifetime, old Shen Furen tried to force her to marry the crippled Prince Yu Zhou in order to pave the way for Shen Qing. She looked at the woman in front of her. Old Shen Furen was very pretty when she was young, her face was sharp and her eyes were large and vivid, but when she became old, her face was like a dry and dull triangle drumhead with two abruptly protruding eyes. But she was not resigned to fate and purposely put bright rouge on her lips. As expected, it was not dignified at all. Shen Miao used her insight from her time as empress and indifferently evaluated in her heart before she humbly said, one has taken the medication and am much better. Thanking Zumu's concern. In the next second, one could hear old Shen Furen loudly shout, unfilial granddaughter, get down on your knees. Unfilial granddaughter, get down on your knees. Shen Miao did not move for the old Shen Furen's words. Everyone looked at her in shock. Shen Xin was not in the residence due to battles, leaving Shen Miao to be brought up by old Shen Furen. With Shen Miao's weak and cowardly character, she had never before refuted old Shen Furen's commands when she was that severe. She actually did not kneel today. Was it true that as long as the matter was related to Prince Ding, she would have tremendous courage? Zoom Yu, what mistake did fifth lady make? Shen Miao calmly asked. As the fever-making fifth younger sister confused, Shen Yu was the first to speak with an anxious expression on her face. Zoom Yu only spoke in a moment of anger and would not truly punish you. As long as you admit your mistake, then the matter would be concluded. Why are you being stubborn? This sentence had already placed the fault of knowing one's error, being unwilling to change and going against elders onto Shen Miao's head. Impudent. The skies have fallen. Old Shen Furen was so angry that she suddenly sat upright and her voice became sharper. Shen Yuanbo was so frightened by old Shen Furen's sudden action that the sweet steam milk pastries he was holding accidentally fell onto the ground, causing him to burst into tears. Seventh son mustn't cry. Ren Wanyan saw that her youngest son was crying and immediately took a few steps forward to pull him in her arms as she looked at Shen Miao with an unfavorable manner. Fifth lady, are you crazy? Who taught you to go against one's elders? Shen Miao looked at Ren Wanyan. Second Furen, Ren Wanyan, who wore a blue silk dress, was full-bodied, with a rosy and fair plump face. When one saw her, she looked kind and benevolent as she usually had a smile on her face. She had the authority of the household in her hands and everyone in Shen residence respected her fairness in handling matters. She was entirely worthy as a good daughter-in-law and wife. Shen Miao also thought the same up until she was married off. Shen Xin added almost half of his assets into the dowry, but, in the end, only a few ended up at Prince Ding's residence. Why was it like that? It was naturally because it was swallowed up by Ren Wanyan. Ren Wanyan confiscated the more valuable items in the dowry and with the owner changed in addition to Shen Xin not being in the capital, she was married foolishly into Prince Ding's residence. Her dowry was the reason that she had lost her standing in the entire Prince Ding's residence. It was all due to this good Shen Xin's fairness. Second Shen's remark means that fifth lady is wrong. Shen Miao softly said, but fifth lady does not know where one went wrong. Stupid thing. Old Shen Furen did not hold back and immediately cursed, already at such an age and still does not know what shame is. To steal a look at His Highness Prince Ding. You have shamed the entire Shen residence. And to even dare to rebut me. Who taught you the rules for you to be this disrespectful? Shen Miao sighed softly in her heart. Old Shen Furen usually had an air of arrogance, but once she opened her mouth, it was the speech of a songstress. Which old Furen of a noble family would curse like this? It was exactly like a common prostitute. Before, she did not feel that way, but after being an empress and seeing this, she felt that old Shen Furen's words had brought down her status. Steal a look at His Highness Prince Ding. She tilted her head in confusion. Shen Yu could not help but say, fifth younger sister, although it is known that you are in love with Prince Ding, but to fall into the water just to steal a look at Prince Ding is detrimental to the face of this residence. Moreover, His Highness Prince Ding would not be happy in his heart. Fifth younger sister, you had better find a chance to apologize to Prince Ding. Being in love with Prince Ding and having to apologize to Prince Ding. Which female would be willing to lose face in front of her beloved man? In her previous lifetime, Shen Yu also spoke like that and old Shen Furen thought likewise, but Shen Miao felt that it was embarrassing to death and was then confined by old Shen Furen in a rage. This one sentence of being in love with Prince Ding and not knowing any shame, thus ruining one's own reputation, implicated the entire residence. Shen Yu looked gentle and elegant, but her mind could turn and twist things. Shen Miao could not help but look at her. Shen Yu just finished speaking when she saw Shen Miao peering at her. That pair of black eyes like grapes were exceptionally clear, as if they contained some special intention, shocking her for a moment. In the next second, Shen Miao's faint voice was heard, second older sister, what in love with His Highness Prince Ding? This sentence cannot be said. At the moment, fifth lady is a young lady yet to be wed. To say such a thing, one would fear that this would destroy fifth lady's reputation. Shen Yu was stunned. The entire noble circle in the capital knew that Shen Miao was in love with Prince Ding. Although Shen Miao had not stated it before, her words and deeds had indicated as much. Why did she deny it now? She smiled, fifth younger sister, there is only our own family here. These things need not be hidden. Second older sister. As she was talking, Shen Miao suddenly interrupted her as she loudly and severely said, second older sister must be careful with her words as trouble will come when improper words are spoken. His Highness Prince Ding is a royal aristocrat and, we, as old influential family, must be even more cautious with our conduct. Previously it was fifth lady that was young and immature, leading towards thoughts and deeds being misunderstood, but what happened the other day was a lesson. Fifth lady will restrict one's words and actions, so may second older sister please not say such words. These words stunned not only Shen Yu but everyone in the house, including old Shen Furen. Shen Miao was usually very soft and timid and had never spoken loudly before. She was one who was obedient and easy to control. How could her words be this swift and severe? A flash of light crossed Chen Ruchu's eyes. Shen Yu was still young, and therefore was not as smart as her. She came from a family of scholars and so was not without smarts. Usually she was lofty in nature and would never admit defeat, so when she saw her own daughter was at a disadvantage, she was annoyed and immediately with a gentle and soft voice said, with one sentence fifth lady could clear up the matter of being in love or not, but when all is said and done, who is able to guess a female's heart? But fifth lady better listen to third Shenshin's words, your second older sister words were not wrong. His Highness Prince Ding's status is noble, hence, one should apologize to him. That is correct. Old Shen Furen also recovered and said, send a card to Prince Ding's residence tomorrow and personally apologize. Shen Miao almost laughed with rage. These words could actually be used to deceive the innocent her in the previous lifetime. To see it now, she was a daughter of a family with military lineage, her status was very noble, so why should she go to a prince to apologize? If that was done, where would Shen Shin put his face? One was afraid this would be yet another joke that would spread in the capital from tomorrow onwards. She also finally understood that old Furen saw Shen Shin, who was delivered by the Yuan Pei, as a sore in her eyes and could not wait to see the first household make a fool of themselves every day. The best would be for it to collapse as early as possible, and because Shen Shin and Shen Furen were not in the capital, she could use Shen Miao as a raft. In this world, how could there be such a good thing? Shen Miao lightly smiled as her eyes fell onto Shen Qing who was quiet from the beginning. She said, eldest sister, when I fell into the water, there was only you at my side. Shen Qing raised her head and nodded quietly. She had already thought of it previously. Shen Miao would definitely say that it was her who pushed her into the water, but Shen Qing was not afraid. The one who currently made the decisions in the Shen family was old Furen and Ren Wanyan, and Shen Miao only had the title of a young lady but was in actuality a daughter that the three households did not care about. As long as she insisted, old Furen and Ren Wanyu would side with her. At that time Shen Miao would be considered to be lying and would definitely be disliked by old Furen, who would punish her heavily. She deserved it. Who told her that a vulgar and ignorant daughter like her could also fight with her for Prince Ding? She should have drowned on that day. Eldest sister, did you also see His Highness Prince Ding? Shen Miao asked, but she did not only mean this. Have seen. Shen Qing replied. Then it is as such. In the previous day, it was obvious that eldest sister and I were playing at the edge of the pond and I accidentally fell into the water. At the same moment His Highness Prince Ding, who was passing by the Shen residence, came in to get the painting from second Shu and encountered the incident. Shen Miao shook her head. If I were to steal a look at Prince Ding, where would I get the information from? It is unreasonable for second and third Shu servants to pass the news to the inner residence. How would one know that His Highness Prince Ding would come to the Shen residence to request a painting from second Shu, unless one is a prophet? Or, she leisurely continued, could it be that His Highness Prince Ding sent a card to our residence? Shen Qing did not understand the meaning Shen Miao's words and wanted to refute with a frown, but she heard her own mother suddenly shout, eldest daughter. The voice was unable to hide the urgency behind it. Shen Miao glanced at the pale-looking Ren Wanyan and the suddenly nervous Chen Ruchu and smiled faintly. What she said, how could anyone not hear the meaning beneath the words when there were so many smart people in the residence? When Fu Shuyi went over to the Shen residence the day before, it was because when he passed by the Shen residence he remembered the chess bet with Shen Gui and went looking for him for a painting. Now Shen Miao asked if a card was sent in advance. Presently the emperor hated when the princes and officials got too close, and if one were to send an invitation in advance, what does the card mean? To plan for the future person next in line. There were thousands of eyes and ears in the world, who would know if there were any spies of the royal family in the Shen residence? Some words could not even be said aloud. The sentence from Shen Miao had already gone above the conduct of females concerning the loyalty of the officials. Shen Shin was in the northwest region and naturally it would not affect him, but there was still Shen Gui and Shen Wan in the Shen residence and these two people held positions in court. This reason, Shen Yu and Shen Qing did not understand, but Ren Wanyan and Chen Ruchu definitely understood. Shen Miao sneered in her heart. They wanted to trample on her reputation, so she brought out Shen Gui's and Shen Wan's heads to bet. Did her second and third Shens understand? Was it worth it? Did they dare? Shen Qing looked at her mother with an unknowing look. Though she was unwilling, she still obediently kept her mouth shut. Despite not understanding what was wrong with Shen Miao's words, upon seeing Chen Ruchu's nervous expression, Shen Yu became aware of what was going on and so she stood in place respectfully and no longer spoke. Old Shen Furen's brows tightened. Even though she had followed old General Shen for so many years, she did not know the intricate twists and turns of the official circles as her sights were confined to the skies between the four walls of the courtyard. How could she understand the meaning behind Shen Miao's words? She only felt that Shen Miao ate the wrong medication today and repeatedly contradicted her to such a degree that she felt offended and wanted to blow up in anger. Little Five's words are not wrong. Ren Wanyan smiled and interrupted when old Shen Furen was about to lash out. This was originally a misunderstanding. How could the matter of the main hall be spread to the inner courtyard? This was all a coincidence. His Highness Prince Dine is broad-minded and would not take such a small matter to heart. It was all a misunderstanding. It is unfortunate for our little Five who fell into the water and got a shock. You have suffered a lot. Old Shen Furen had opened her mouth and was somewhat dissatisfied with her second daughter-in-law for interrupting her. But Ren Wanyan's family was Ming Qi's famous merchant family and many times the daily cost was subsidized by this daughter-in-law. Even though she was not satisfied, she could not offend her. She immediately harumphed coldly but did not continue on. Chen Ruchu seemed to be aware of it and also went along with Ren Wanyan's words. That is precisely so. In the future Yu and Qing'er must never mention the words from before. It was little Five that fell into the water accidentally and was coincidentally seen by His Highness Prince Ding. There are such coincidences in the world. She smiled towards Shen Miao. Little Five, old Furen feels anguished for you and is not truly angry. Shen Miao looked at the female in front of her. Shen Yu took after Chen Ruchu so much that even her temperament was the same. Chen Ruchu was born in a family of scholars and thus she was a graceful beauty who was usually soft and gentle when walking or talking and was beautiful but not frivolous. Such a female with a literary sense was also a good partner, but who knew what would happen later. Later the Xiongnu came over to request a marriage alliance and there was only one age-appropriate princess, Wan Yu. Chen Ruchu said that Shen Yu was older and a marriage alliance was also a marriage, so she was willing to marry the Xiongnu. But Shen Yu was not a princess so Fu Shuyi conferred Shen Yu the title of Princess Yu so that it was justifiable for her to be in a marriage alliance with the Xiongnu. But ultimately the one who was married off was her Wan Yu. Wan Yu died on the way to the marriage and Wan Yu's princess's residence was given to Princess Yu. As such, Princess Yu was expected to receive everything of Wan Yu's. Her Wan Yu was not even 16 years old. Shen Miao closed her eyes. If one said that Chen Ruchu did not put any effort into this matter, Chen Ruchu herself would also not believe it. But one would fear that Chen Ruchu had already reached an agreement with Mei Furen and the main reason was to let her think that there was hope only to then shatter that hope herself. Chen Ruochu's smile stiffened. She saw fifth young lady looking at her. That round face, round eyes, and round nose, coupled with the timid appearance, used to easily leave an impression of stupidity and foolishness. But now it was otherwise. She did not know when the timid appearance had disappeared to be replaced with solemnness. Not quite a sudden pressure of seriousness, but it was a slight feeling of distance. There was a moment when Chen Ruchu suddenly felt that the person in front of her was not the stupid and foolish daughter of the first household but some mistress of higher status and power, the kind that would make smarter and sharper people shiver. In the next second, one could see that the young female shifted her gaze. I believe that third Shenshin also feels that little Five is not wrong. Chen Ruchu was surprised for a moment, before she looked at the displeasure of the old Furen sitting at a higher level and said reluctantly, be that as it may, it was really too careless of little Five to fall into the pond. How do the few maids beside you take care of people? Eldest brother and eldest sister-in-law are not by one side so the maids started to bully the masters. According to what Shen sees, it would be better to replace these maids. A laugh escaped from Ren Wanyan with a pukai sound. Chen Ruchu glared at her somewhat angrily and a sneer formed on Ren Wanyan lips. This Di Mei of hers looked like a well-educated person but her heart was extremely shrewd. These kind of words could only be used to deceive that foolish Shen Miao. She most likely wanted to change the people by Shen Miao's side. By now Shen Yu had also reached the age where others would start paying attention and in the capital, no matter how far Shen Miao's foolish or stupid reputation has spread, in terms of status, Shen Yu's was unable to be compared to Shen Miao's. After all, Shen still held the military power in his hands. Consequently the third household was also ready to create trouble. Shen Miao lowered her head. Gu Yu and the rest are father and mother's people, why would third Shen want to replace them? At present there are many personnel changes in the west courtyard. Just a few days ago, a batch of second-rank maids were sent over and fifth lady did not recognize a single one. If Gu Yu and the rest are changed, then fifth lady would not know who to talk to in the west courtyard. Ren Wanyu's smile stopped short. In the west courtyard, because Shen and his wife were not in the capital most of the year many of the maids in the courtyard had been changed. There were old Furens, second households, and third households people. But because the second household was managing the family, naturally there were more people from the second household. If these words were not said it would be better, but if it was spread to outsiders that the daughter of the first household did not know a single servant in her own courtyard, what intentions did the second and third household have? There was no logic that a younger sister-in-law could intervene in the courtyard of the eldest brother. Her brain started to turn quickly as she smiled, giving Chen Ruchu a look before saying to Shen Miao, your third Shen is joking with you. Gu Yu and the few maids are just careless and sloppy but we, the Shen family, are benevolent and cannot bear to do such inhuman things. Little Five must not be anxious. The words at the end choked Chen Ruchu. Shen Yuanbo looked at his mother and then looked over at Chen Ruchu before yawning. Old Shen Furen was getting impatient with her own second and third daughters-in-law when she saw the scene and said, that's enough. It's only some trivial matter. Second son's family, carry seventh son over and then disperse. So many people making so much noise that it makes one's head dizzy. Ren Wanyu quickly carried Shen Yuanbo to old Shen Furen's couch and said, Mother, these daughters-in-law will go first. Seventh son will play obediently with old Furen. Chen Ruchu glanced over at Shen Yuanbo and both her hands went up to her belly as she slowly exited from Rong Jingtang. The second household had sons so they were looked upon highly by old Shen Furen. So what if she had the ability? Shen Yu was still a daughter. It would be good if she had a son. In the Shen residence, the things from the first residence would need to be fought over and if she had a son, at least there would be equal shares, not like now, letting the second household have all the advantage. Moreover, there was still a D-son in the first household. Even though he followed Shen Xin to the border, who knew if he would come back to fight for a share? After much thinking, Chen Ruchu raised her head and her eyes landed on the people heading towards the west courtyard. The young female was wearing a dark red embroidered dress where before she always loved to wear brightly colored ones. In addition, with no parents at her side, she did not know how to dress up and would always portray an unsophisticated look. But now, the crimson color of the clothes made her complexion fairer. She obviously still had the same appearance but one felt that she was much more solemn. And there was also an imposing air. Gu Yu softly said, young lady's health is not recovered yet, why the hurry to head to the academy? Since the health condition was already explained, the homework does not need to be completed in a rush. It would be better. No, Shen Miao interrupted her words, prepare the carriage immediately. They were clearly not harsh words, so Gu Yu did not know why she shivered and dared not ask more. Guang Wentang was Ding Capital's academy. Ming Qi's officials and the wealthy would often place their sons and daughters into Guang Wentang as Guang Wentang's teachers were perhaps geniuses or reputable scholars of the four scholarly fields. As for young noble females, they could also enter Guang Wentang with pride. Shen Miao also studied in Guang Wentang. Unfortunately Shen Xin and Shen Furen were from military families and eldest brother, Shen Chu, was someone who would have a headache if he were to study. Shen Miao was brought up by old Shen Furen and she was a songstress who did not know many words. Shen Miao was taught by third Shen Furen, Chen Ruchu. Chen Ruchu came from a family of scholars and at the beginning taught Shen Miao books that were difficult to understand. Kids would normally prefer to play, so after much teaching, so Shen Miao completely hated reading and writing. Chen Ruchu saw that Shen Miao did not like studying and did not force her, instead teaching her to pay attention to food and clothes, living the life of a delicate young lady. When she was of age to go to Guangwentang, Shen Miao was unable to keep up with the lectures from the teachers and her knowledge was worse off than those at level 1, and thus became the student at the bottom of the class. Since Shen Miao did not like studying, she became infamous throughout the entire Ding capital for being stupid and ignorant. Among the 3D young ladies of the Shen family, Shen Yu was the famous one. She was learned in the 4 arts of qin, chess, calligraphy and painting, and there was not one thing that was not perfect. Even though Shen Qing was not as outstanding as Shen Yu, she also did a good job, especially in embroidery, and was considered as first class in calculations. As someone who would be married and become the mistress of a family, if one had a good head for calculation, one would be able to increase the favors from the in-laws, so Shen Qing was also able to get the reputation of being competent. The more outstanding Shen Yu and Shen Qing were, the more Shen Miao would appear as nothing. Even becoming incomparable to the Shu daughter of the second household, Shen Dongling. In the carriage, Jing Jie asked, "Young lady, why not travel together with eldest young lady and second young lady?" Usually, Shen Miao would always want to take the same carriage as Shen Qing and Shen Yu, as Shen Miao felt that having her older sisters with her would boost her courage. As for Shen Yu and Shen Qing, the reason they allowed this was most probably because with a stupid and foolish sister as comparison, they would naturally look better. But now Shen Miao did not even want to put up the pretense of compliance. To begin with, these people are not from the same household, living under the same roof but walking on roads that are poles apart. So why travel together? Jing Jie did not know why she stuck her tongue out. The more her young lady spoke, the more she did not understand, but she felt that this was also good. Shen Miao's character had been too weak and she would always let the second and third household make the decisions. This time, on the matter of her falling into the water, it seemed that she had her own ideas. This was correct, the status of the official daughter of the first household was not inferior to anyone, so why act like a maid? In the other carriage, Shen Yu pulled the curtain back to secretly look behind and softly said, "Eldest sister, fifth younger sister is following behind. She is purposely throwing a fit at me." Shen Qing coldly scoffed. In front of Shen Yu, she never bothered to conceal her contempt of Shen Miao. Let her be, anyways the person who would be disgraced would not be me. Shen Yu said worriedly, but she was infected with a cold and the matter with His Highness Prince Ding is also. Shen Yu, Shen Qing said, "How could I not know what your heart is thinking? Don't pretend to be a good person here. If you are really concerned about her, then you should go and sit in her carriage and not spout principles." Shen Yu bit her lip as she looked down and did not say anything more. The carriage traveled for almost half a shichen before finally reaching Guangwentang. It was still early, so the teachers had yet to start class. The second-level students had almost all arrived and were sitting at the classroom chatting. Shen Yu and Shen Qing just reached the room when immediately there were some females who went up to greet them warmly. In Guangwentang, Shen Yu was number 1 in terms of talent for the females. She was pretty and her temperament was gentle, hence she was naturally sought after by everyone. Even though Shen Qing was not as outstanding as Shen Yu, she was also capable and handled things smoothly, so the circle of noble young ladies liked her a lot. A pink-clad young female said, "Yu Niang, why is Shen Miao not here today?" Usually Shen Miao would be like a maid following beside Shen Yu and Shen Qing, but it was unusual to not see her today. Most likely she did not have any face to show up. The young lady who said that looked charming, but her voice was somewhat loud and she had some ridiculing expression on her face. "I heard that she fell into the water while stealing a look at His Highness Prince Ding. Was it because she has yet to recover from her cold or that she did not have any face to see anyone?" "Peilan, it is not like that." Shen Yu shook her head. "You are too protective of your younger sister." Yi Peilan said, "That kind of stupid and foolish person should simply not come out from your Shen residence. You should always keep an eye on her." But she really opened the eyes of everyone in the world. Usually she looks timid and sticky, but once she meets His Highness Prince Ding, she is so brave. Those who did not know would wonder what sort of small family taught such a poor-mannered young lady. These words were somewhat serious. Shen Qing heard it and laughed. Fifth younger sister was only mischievous in that moment. "I think it is because General Shen and Shen Furen are not by her side teaching her." Another young female with a horse-style bun said, "The lack of discipline means that even the etiquette and manners of a female are not known." Kai Zan's words are not right. Shen Yu softly spoke. Even though eldest Bo Fu and eldest Bo Mu are not in Ding capital, fifth younger sister was brought up by Zhu Mu and my mother, and second Shen also constantly taught her, so there was no lack of discipline. The unspoken implication was that Shen Miao had no sense of shame or honor. Sure enough, when Shen Yu's words came out, Yi Peilan spoke out, "This is strange. With the same set of parenting, Yu Niang and Qing Niang, you and Shen Miao are as different as the sky and the earth." This is probably what the teacher was saying. Mud will not stick to the wall. As she said this, she started chuckling, causing the surrounding noble females to also start laughing. Even some young males could not help but look over. In the next moment, they heard someone shouting, "Look, Shen Miao is here." Everyone looked towards the door, holding on to the hope that there would be a show to watch. They saw a young female walking slowly from the door, wearing a dark red outfit with cloud and geese embroidery and a dark blue, embroidered cloak. These colors would normally be too old for young females, especially since Shen Miao was a little rounded. If she was not careful, she would look like a child who had stolen an elder's clothes to wear. Her footsteps were slow and the corners of her skirt did not move as each step was very light yet still had weight. One did not know why it felt as if there was a graceful air of magnanimity. Her chin was slightly raised and her eyes were naturally placid, as if one was unable to see the bottom of her eyes, but all the energy was confined inside, like a beast that had kept all its claws and teeth. Her 5 facial features were still lovable because her face was round and adorable, but now there was no trace of stupidity. Though she had yet to grow up, when coupled with her dignified manner, it was unexpectedly not out of sorts. It was not the manner a young female but was more like those noble Furen with high status or a firm and decisive master of the entire family or residence. The classroom gradually quieted down. What was Shen Miao like? If one were to ask the students in Guangwentang, whether they were from level 1, 2 or 3, everyone would know. How could someone be so stupid and silly but still try to maintain a virtuous and gentle image? Her appearance was nothing unique, her personality traits were not outstanding, she had no talents at all and was such a lovesick idiot that everyone in the Ding capital knew that she was in love with Prince Ding. Therefore, if the most outstanding female in Guangwentang was Shen Yu, then the most insignificant female would naturally be Shen Miao. They were both females from the Shen family, but their images were completely different. Everyone was used to Shen Miao being like a maid and staying by Shen Yu's side. So if there was a day when Shen Miao no longer acted like Shen Miao, no one would be used to it. Yi Peilan tugged Shen Yu. "Yu Niang, could your younger sister have been so sick that she is confused, else why is she like a different person today?" Shen Yu looked at Shen Miao and was puzzled in her heart. It was like ever since she woke up after falling into the water, Shen Miao's temperament had changed drastically. Was it because she had suffered a setback regarding the matter with Prince Ding? Just as she wanted to say something, Zhang Kaizan, her good friend who was standing by her side spoke. Shen Miao, I heard that you fell into the water, but it seems that your cold is better already. When such obvious words were said, it would actually make one embarrassed. If it was the usual Shen Miao, she would be at a loss and would look towards Shen Yu to plead for Shen Yu to help her speak. But now she just looked at Zhang Kaizan and lightly said, all right, thank you for your concern. Zhang Kaizan was stunned and everyone in the class was surprised for a moment. Perhaps they did not expect that Shen Miao would be this lukewarm to matters about herself, but Zhang Kaizan found Shen Miao's attitude to be extremely sore to her eyes and immediately said, since you have recovered from your cold, then the first thing should be giving His Highness Prince Ding an apology, but you came to the academy instead. Don't you think that you have put the cart before the horse? Shen Miao took a deep breath. The students around, no matter if they were females or males, had no intention to speak up for her. She originally did not have any friends and seeing Shen Miao make a fool of herself was presumably the only fun these aristocratic kids had. After sweeping a look at the different expressions of everyone and seeing the joy at her misfortune in Shen Qing's eyes, Shen Miao was about to leave when she heard Shen Yu saying, His Highness Prince Ding is broad-minded and would not blame this little thing on fifth younger sister. Fifth younger sister came to the academy due to the thirst for knowledge, which is a good thing. What a good thing. The youth on the other side could not help but laugh. He was secretly in love with Shen Yu for a long time and usually was dissatisfied with Shen Miao, finding that having a younger sister like Shen Miao was Shen Yu's tragedy. He said, the thirst for knowledge. Shen Yu, if you really want to help this younger sister, then you need not say such words. The thirst for knowledge. The person who did not know the lesson taught by the level 1 teachers talking about the thirst for knowledge. This is just too funny. Furthermore, he purposely sized Shen Miao up and continued, who knows if she fell into the water on purpose or not. Don't the skits always show the hero rescuing the beauty who fell into the water and devote one's life to? But one would have guessed the ending incorrectly. Finishing, he found his words were interesting and burst into laughter. He was the head of this group of youths, so when he said such things, the surrounding youths also followed up with laughter. The noble females surrounding Shen Yu also felt that it was funny and for a period of time laughter surrounded Shen Miao and all the eyes on her were filled with malicious intent. Words were the sharpest weapon to hurt people. In her last life, there were many such scenarios. She had already gotten used to being despised, laughed at and insulted and was reluctant to break these notions. Thus, Shen Yu and Shen Qing had better relationships with the circle of noble females while she grew further away. She had thought that this was the greatest misfortune, but as compared to the tragedies in her previous life, what were these considered as? These young females were not even as old as her Wan Yu and Fu Ming and only instigated some disharmony. Were these people really her enemies? Naturally not. These females of merit were not considered extremely wealthy and there was no lack of aristocrats. But what kind of ending did these aristocratic families have in her past lifetime? All of them were exterminated one by the late emperor and Fu Shuyi. Like this person who was ridiculing her, one of Shen Yu's admirers and currently the eldest son of the esteemed Kai family, Kai Lin. After a few years, the Kai family will be involved in a corruption case and as with others, assets were confiscated and Kai Lin was sent to the army. It was such a pity that he had admired Shen Yu for so many years, but in the end, Shen Yu drew a line on her relationship with him. She was not in a hostile relationship with these young females and some of them even stood on the same side. It was because these aristocratic families were provoked deliberately by the emperor to pit one against the other that they did not keep in close contact with each other. Some even regarded the other with hatred. There was no need to turn an ally into an enemy. When she was empress, Shen Miao learned a lot. One must not make an enemy in a moment of emotion, it would not be worthwhile. Kai Lin, how could you say that about fifth younger sister? Waiting until everyone had laughed enough, Shen Yu then suddenly said, fifth younger sister is not that kind of person. Kai Lin, Shen Miao interrupted Shen Yu with no trace of any variation in her voice, who told you that I fell into the water due to stealing a look at His Highness Prince Ding. To say such a thing so loudly would cause one to be looked down upon, but when Shen Miao said those words, she was calm and her tone was filled with indifference, surprising everyone for a moment. Kai Lin was the little overlord here and, on normal days, Shen Miao would not dare to say much when she met him, so when would she use this tone of voice? And this tone unconsciously had a commanding trace. Kai Lin himself did not know why he did not start scolding but instead said, could it be not the case? So it was like this, Shen Miao said to herself and suddenly smiled slightly as she turned towards Shen Yu and Shen Qing. Eldest sister and second older sister, it is all right if they did not know, but how can both of you not know? Why did you not clarify for your younger sister? Shen Yu and Shen Qing were startled, suddenly remembering their mother's insistence that the matter of Shen Miao falling into the water must not be said wrongly. Shen Qing, who was able to take the big picture into consideration better than Shen Yu, immediately said, yes, you all better not say such nonsense. At that time I was with fifth younger sister. I witnessed it with my own eyes that fifth younger sister accidentally fell into the water and at the same time His Highness Prince Ding coincidentally passed by and saw her. It had nothing to do with admiration. Hearing Shen Qing speaking so confidently, though everyone did not believe it, it was not as serious as before. But Shen Miao said, unless one witnesses it themselves, then it would be nonsense. Guang Wentan is a place where morals are taught. Besides, the topic of being in love is such a beautiful topic, why was it said so unbearably? When I, Shen Miao, love someone, I will love in a dignified manner. His Highness Prince Ding's status is too noble, how would I have deep feelings? All of you are incorrect. In this world, it is very difficult to change the impression of anyone. Moreover, her love of Fu Shuyi was something that was well known throughout the world. To say that she did not love now, she was afraid that no one would believe it at all. In any case, the line must be drawn somewhere. Just as the words were spoken, a voice of praise sounded out, what a good dignity of admiration. A young male in his early 20s walked in from the outside. He wore light robes and his features were straight. Even though his stature was slightly weak, one could tell that he was what a gentleman should look like. He walked in and praised, that was said well. There is also dignity in love and it should not be something to be mocked. Even though Guang Wentang is a place for learning, it is also a place to practice one's virtue. Not one of the students uttered a single word. Shen Miao looked closely at that young man. Pei Lang, an accounting teacher at Guang Wentang. He had both integrity and talent and was the only Shukai in Guang Wentang that could teach accounting. Pei Shukai had a gentle temperament and was patient. When compared to other strict teachers, he was more worthy of the respect of the students. Even Shen Miao, who was at the end of the spectrum, was never scolded by Pei Shukai as he would patiently and repeatedly explain. If that was the case, then this person was a good teacher. His moral character and talents were one in tens of thousands, but unfortunately Shen Miao also knew his other identity. Fu Shuyi relied heavily on his aides and advisors and when Fu Shuyi ascended to the throne, he conferred him the title of National Preceptor. National Preceptor Pei Lang was proud of his success, only beneath one person and above tens of thousands. As a national preceptor, he really did well. Shen Miao thought that Pei Lang was an intelligent and upright person, however, during the time when the crown prince was deposed, he was silent. Shen Miao's and Pei Lang's private friendship could be considered good. At the beginning, the proposal of Shen Miao going to the Qin country to be a hostage was brought up by Pei Lang. Pei Lang said, "This is for the sake of the empire of Mingqi. If your ladyship is willing to go, it would resolve His Majesty's desperate situation. In the future, there will be the Empress's shadow all over the country and everyone will appreciate the grace of your ladyship." But in fact, when she returned to the palace after 5 years, there was an additional Mei Furan in the inner palace and Pei Lang's people who previously respected her began to have precautions against her instead. When the crown prince was abolished, Shen Miao went down to her knees to beg Pei Lang because Pei Lang was Fu Shuyi's trusted aide and when Pei Lang spoke, Fu Shuyi would definitely listen to his views. But Pei Lang supported her up and said to her, "Your ladyship, this official is also powerless on matters that His Majesty has decided." Pei Lang, could it be that you will watch as the crown prince is abolished? You are fully aware that the matter of the abolishment of the crown prince cannot proceed. She was extremely furious as she questioned him aggressively. This is already ultimately inevitable. Your ladyship should resign to one's fate. Pei Lang said with a sigh. Resign to one's fate. How could one resign to fate? If there was a chance to repeat and one still needed to resign to fate, wouldn't it be too lamentable and hateful? Shen Miao's eyes focused on the young man in front. He was straightforward, upright, and had a gentle temperament but was also callous and cold-hearted and could see one's death without helping. As an official, everything was done for the sake of the country, and Pei Lang was a loyal official. But, as long as he stood by Fu Shuyi's side, he would be opposing her endlessly in this life. At this current period, Fu Shuyi should not have subdued Pei Shukai, so was there a possibility of pulling Pei Shukai to her side before that happened? Or just simply, nip him in the bud? Pei Shukai had just put down the book in his hands when he felt a pair of eyes on him. He looked up and met Shen Miao's eyes full of unknown implication. Even though Shen Miao's sitting position was in the back, she still stubbornly stared at him. This feeling was a bit strange and Pei Shukai felt that there was a sense of judgment and scrutiny in that expression as if she was weighing the pros and cons before making a decision. To go deeper, there was also a critical look on her face. He stopped his movements, wanting to clearly see what expression Shen Miao was showing, but he saw the young lady pick up the brush on the table and bow her head. Pei Lang smiled in his heart and shook his head. How could a little girl portray a condescending look? As for passing judgment and scrutiny, it would be even more impossible. Shen Miao was the most stupid and timid person in Guangwen. After tidying up some things, he started the class. The entirety of the level 2 students were a little drowsy. One would easily feel bored during accounting lessons and no matter how marvelously Pei Shukai teaches, they were all 14 or 15-year-old youths who were at the age of jumping around, so how would they even listen? Coupled with the cool autumn weather, there were many who were taking a nap. If it was other teachers, they would have taken a ruler out to reprimand them, but Pei Lang was the gentlest person and would never punish the students. So everyone would have the courage to misbehave in his class. Other than Shen Qing, who was always the first in accounting, listening seriously, the others were so bored that they did their own stuff. The Shen Miao today was different. She stared at Pei Shukai without blinking and sat upright as if she was earnestly listening. This was something incredible as she usually hated to study and had no interest in accounts. It was already a miracle that she was not asleep, but she was actually listening actively in class. The beautiful young female who was sitting with Shen Miao at the same table was wearing a thin, chrysanthemum embroidered dress and looked somewhat haughty. Seeing Shen Miao seriously listening to the lesson, she could not help to reveal a surprised look, her eyebrows raising from time to time. Why would Shen Miao care that much? Previously she had no interest in books, but after becoming the empress, her foundation was not stable and she needed to maintain life in the inner palace carefully. She, as the empress, also needed to reduce the cost of living, and after doing all that personally, she felt that books were no longer that difficult. Every matter of the inner palace, from the big matters like the cost of each ceremony to the smallest matter like the cups and snacks of the concubines, was all included in the accounts, which were considerable and messy. She had looked each one individually, so how could these calculations in the textbooks matter? She only wanted to work harder to see clearly what kind of person Pei Shukai actually was. Only with this method could she then know what kind of methods would be appropriate for this person. When her focused look was seen by the young female beside her, it was already very unusual. Only after the calculation lesson finished and Pei Shukai left did Shen Miao retrieve back her gaze. Her desk mate tugged her sleeves as she spoke with a tone of surprise. Shen Miao, are you possessed by evil spirits? Why do you say that? Shen Miao asked. The young female in front of her was Feng and Ning, the daughter of the Minister of Attendance. The Feng family was initially one of the capital's meritorious and rich officials and Feng and Ning had been raised with an arrogant and willful temperament. But in the last life, old Feng master supported the wrong team and when the new emperor ascended the throne, he was dismissed. In order to save this daughter from harm, he could only marry her off early to a distant cousin. After Feng family collapsed, Feng and Ning, who was married off, also did not have a good ending. That cousin had a gilded exterior, but had a shabby and ruined character beneath. Feng and Ning was not even married for a year when he had a son with a concubine outside. He still scolded her as the burden that the Feng family left. How could Feng and Ning take such grievances? She immediately picked up a pair of scissors and killed the concubine and herself. All the various things that happened in her past life were now like clouds floating by. Looking again at the young woman with haughty expression, what would she have thought of her tragic ending in the future? When Shen Miao now looked at the youths in Guangwen, she felt that she was looking at children like Fu Ming and Wan Yu and could not muster any feelings of anger or annoyance. Other than Shen Qing and Shen Yu, who were two-faced villains, most of them were just spoiled children. And all these spoiled young ladies and men would encounter a cruel fate in the next 10 years' time. Seeing that she did not speak, Feng and Ning was somewhat dissatisfied as she said, are you disregarding me on purpose? Shen Miao, you are so hard-working today because of the academy examination in a month's time, correct? Your older sister mentioned that you want to take the opportunity to shine so that others will be able to see you. After all, she was a good child. After listening to Pei Shukai's words, she did not talk about being in love with Prince Ding. Academy examinations. Shen Miao raised her eyebrows. Guangwen academy examinations were held every year during the 10th month. The academy examinations were a test for every student in the academy, especially for the outstanding students who would be showcasing their talents. Most importantly, that day there would be many high-ranking officials watching and princes looking from the side. If there were any good students, perhaps career opportunities would be available. In short, one would show off one's talent for others to see in order to be famous. This was why in every academy examination, everyone would use all their energy and effort to achieve titles. In grade 2, Shen Yu's talent was the most extensive and she would always stand above the crowd during the academy examinations. Although Shen Qing was not as good as Shen Yu in terms of poetry, her calculation skills were among the best and she would usually get a few top rankings. If one were to talk about those lacking accomplishment, the one at the bottom would be Shen Miao. She did not know any of the 4 scholarly arts and her arithmetic was the worst. In every academy examination, she would always embarrass herself. Not to mention showcasing her talents, it would be very hard to even pass the tests. The Shen Miao in the past lifetime was most afraid of the yearly academy examinations as she could see Shen Yu and Shen Qing being proud of their success while she could only be very envious in her heart. Now when she looked, she only felt that it was merely jealousy amongst kids. What kind of battle had she not seen before? The academy examinations were really nothing in her eyes. She peered at Feng and Ning and said, what about academy examinations? I never thought of fighting for whatever top or bottom ranking. What is there to contend for? Feng and Ning was slightly surprised as she did not think that Shen Miao would be so magnanimous to say the truth of the matter. She looked carefully at Shen Miao and asked, you must have heard a lot, else there would not be such a great change in temperament, right? Shen Miao seemed to have a personality change overnight from a dull person to a magnanimous and confident person. It was not a manner one should have at this age. Because they were sitting at the same table, this change in temperament was even more obvious. Yes, Shen Miao smiled and no longer said anything more. Perhaps because of the age of the young females, their instinct was to either respect or envy others who were more mature than themselves. Shen Miao's gestures turned Feng and Ning's attitude towards her imperceptibly better. After the accounting lessons were completed, the students headed to the garden outside Guangwentang to play. The females were all in the academy playing chess or discussing new poetry until they heard the sound of a horse passing. What is that? Yi Peilan turned her head over. Let's go outside and take a look at what it is, Zhang Kaizan proposed as she pulled Shen Yu up. Shen Miao had no intention of joining in the fun. It was Feng and Ning who turned back after taking 2 steps and grabbed Shen Miao's hands after thinking for a bit. Let's go and see. Shen Miao was somewhat surprised as Feng and Ning usually didn't like her, so she wouldn't display such an intimate move. She was puzzled, but she was already being dragged out of the academy by Feng and Ning. There were many students standing outside by the door chatting. When they saw Feng and Ning pulling Shen Miao over, they all wore a surprised look. Shen Yu's eyes flashed imperceptibly, but she did not make a sound. It was Shen Qing who saw it and scoffed. Ever since she realized that Shen Miao was also in love with Prince Ding, she no longer bothered to hide her disdain or put up any pretense. But what was surprising was not this. Kai Lin just squeezed out from the crowd and called out, Little Xie Marquis. Little Xie Marquis. Shen Miao glanced over. Outside Guangwentang's red cinnabar door there stood a red steed. The horse's coat was bright and smooth, and with one look, anyone could tell it was a good steed worth thousands of gold. The horse haughtily kicked forward as its elegant body attracted everyone's attention. But in the end, it was not as dazzling as the person on horseback. The youth sat on the horse's back, wearing a black embroidered robe with a dark purple mink coat worn on top. His right hand lazily played with the horse whip. His facial features were sharp and handsome, the corner of his lips was slightly hooked up, as if smiling yet not, and the gaze of his eyes was very cold. There was a young female in the crowd who immediately blushed and, disregarding where she was, courageously threw a silk handkerchief folded into the shape of a blossom at the youth. Mingqi was a liberal country, so it was tolerant to the rules between young males and females. The silk blossom fell into the arms of the youth and he twisted it in his hand as the corner of his lips hooked up into a smile. The young female who threw the handkerchief immediately flushed, already becoming silly in love. In the next moment the stubborn and obstreperous youth's smile fleeted away. The silk blossom fell onto the ground and landed under the hooves of the red horse, crushing it into an unrecognizable mess. He lazily straightened up, as if there was a naturally born strong evasiveness, but because of his handsome face, it only magnified his attractiveness. He had the innate ability to let one not move their eyes from his presence. What a cold and nasty person. Yi Peilan murmured, it's the little marquis of the Xie family. Shen Miao raised her eyebrows. Little marquis of the Xie family, Xie Jingxing. Most of the old aristocratic vassal families in Mingqi accompanied the late emperor in the founding of the country and achieved meritorious services. After several generations, the aristocratic titles were just empty names. However, some families became more prosperous and lived splendidly. Like the Feng family who were literary officials, there were also those like the Shen family's generals. If one were to say that the Shen family had a military lineage, it would be because they all led troops to fight in wars and were recognized as honest people. Then there was the Xie family who had military power in their hands but always drifted along. Even His Majesty was powerless towards the Xie family. Most likely there was a rebellious streak in the Xie family's bones. All of their deeds were absolutely disgraceful, such as ignoring the capital command to retreat thousands of miles away and instead continuing to pursue the retreating enemy. At the end, they still glorified it as a general should judge and act according to the real situations on the battlefield and thus does not need to obey all orders. But the imperial family was helpless towards the Xie family, as they were invincible in battle. The Shen family and the Xie family had an opposing relationship. This, of course, was deliberately provoked by the previous emperor so that there would be checks and balances to stabilize the court. Shen Qin's and the Xie Marquis's views were never aligned as Shen Qin disapproved of Xie Ding's strange tactics and unorthodox methods. Xie Ding could not understand why Shen Qin still depended on military books during battles and was so conservative that he was inflexible. Both families did not have any interactions besides quarreling in court, thus the late emperor was happy to see such an arrangement. After Xie Ding's wife passed away, he did not marry another wife and the only concubine in the household had 2 sons. This meant that Xie Jingxing had 2 Shu brothers from the same father. Perhaps Xie Ding was distressed that the D son's mother died young and wanted to make it up to him, so he doted Xie Jingxing since young, making Xie Jingxing develop an undisciplined and out-of-control temperament. Even so, Xie Jingxing was a brilliant person. Other than his indifferent nature, he excelled in his studies and had noble features which were well known in Mingqi, else many females would not secretly admire him. It was such a pity, Shen Miao's heart sighed. This kind of outstanding young man, in the end, had arrows shot into his heart and his body hung out after his skin was peeled off, such a tragic ending. Perhaps her pitiful gaze was too obvious, causing the young man to suddenly look over and his eyes, which were as deep as the stars, flashed as though he did not understand her gaze. Shen Miao lowered her head, seeming bashful. Xie Jingxing died at the age of 26. The imperial family of Mingqi became more muddle-headed and incompetent as time passed. They did not consider developing the country's strength, instead, only thinking about how to protect themselves against the vassal families who they viewed as threats. As for Fu Shuyi, the Shen family's objective was to live honestly, whereas the Xie family ignored imperial commands, so naturally they were a thorn in the late emperor's eyes, causing the late emperor to want to punish them. When the Xiongnu attacked, Xie Ding set off with the Xie family troops. Once on the battlefield, the presumptuous general Xia's troops were annihilated to the last man. While Xie Jingxing waited for his father's return, in reality what he waited for was the return of a coffin. Xie Ding's death was not the end. During the funeral, the people in the Ding capital sent Xie Ding off and the entire country was in mourning. To the imperial family, this was a big taboo. Thus, it did not take long for young Xie Jingxing to be appointed to lead the military campaign on behalf of his father. This was not Xie Jingxing's first battle. Like the Xie family, his talent on the battlefield was enough to make the enemy terrified. But despite obviously knowing the queer nature of his father's death, Xie Jingxing went into the battlefield and was defeated. The imperial edict had pushed him onto the road of death. Yet Xie Jingxing still received the imperial edict. That day he was exposed to the enemy and became the target, ending up with thousands of arrows through his heart. Not only that, for unknown reasons, the body was taken away and the Xiongnu skinned it before hanging the body up in the tower to serve as a warning to others. Another tragic outcome was played and Mingqi went into national mourning. Father and son made the battlefield their grave, and the commoners could only see the Xiongnu's brutality and the general's heroism, but they did not see that the undercurrent of this conspiracy. At that time the late emperor was already approaching his deathbed, so Fu Shuyi took over the affairs of the court. In order to express regret for the bitter outcome of the Xie family, he conferred titles to both the father and son. Even though the titles were useless for the deceased, it appeased the court, while the concubine and the two Shu sons gained all the advantages. Shen Miao still remembered Shen Shen's look of pain when he came to know of Xie Jingxing's death. She initially thought that the Xie and Shen family were like water and fire, and when the Xie family fall into despair, her father would not be sad about it. Thinking about it now, it was most likely at that time when Shen Shen experienced the feeling of the fox grieving when the rabbit dies. Since the balance was broken with the collapse of the Xie family, the next to fall would be the Shen family. The ridiculous thing was that at that time she single-mindedly pushed the Shen family into the muddy waters of the fight of the throne. Shen Miao did not have any feelings for the Xie family, and in the beginning she only felt some regret towards the fate of this young man. Such an outstanding young man should be leaving a legacy in the country of Mingqi. Who would have expected such an ending? He knew that the imperial edict was a seal of death, but he still went. Perhaps it was in order to preserve the dignity of the Xie family and to prove that to the very end that the Xie family was loyal to the country. But knowing that it cannot be avoided, yet still proceeding, showed that this unruly Xie Jingxing was not ordinary. He was an extremely upright and brave person. As Shen Miao was thinking about it, Kai Lin squeezed out from the crowd and handed Xie Jingxing a small cloth bag, saying respectfully, "Little Marquis, this is the medical book that you told me to find." For a little overlord to be this respectful to others, it shocked the teeth out of everyone. But after some thought, it would be as such as Xie Jingxing was the capital's overlord. The Xie family were the overlords of the overlords. With such in mind, one would be able to understand Kai Lin's attitude towards Xie Jingxing. Feng and Ning quietly whispered into Shen Miao's ear, "What do you think of little Xie Marquis as compared to His Highness Prince Ding?" Shen Miao choked a little. She was not used to how well Feng and Ning suddenly treated her. But she seriously answered, "Little Xie Marquis is better." Not only better, in her view, such a black-hearted villain as Fu Shuyi could not be compared with Xie Jingxing. In the beginning, when Wan Yu and Fu Ming studied the history of Mingqi and read the part about the Xie family, they would secretly tell her that they felt that Xie Jingxing was a good man through and through, and his death was such a pity. Even her own children praised this youth. Naturally he must be good. Feng and Ning was somewhat surprised and took a while before she said, "It really seems that you are truly pained." Shen Miao could not be bothered to explain it to her. They saw Xie Jingxing on horseback as he casually held the saddle and gave Kai Lin a look. Without any additional words he pulled the horse's reins and turned away stylishly. The horse stirred up a cloud of dust, but it could not conceal the charm of the youth on its back. Like the sun in the skies, he shined with a bright light in one's eyes. Kai Lin was somewhat at a loss, and the surrounding females did not conceal their disappointment as they hoped that Xie Jingxing would stay longer. The strange thing was that Xie Jingxing was the only one that young noblemen would not be jealous of his reputation with the young ladies. It could be that his way of doing things and personality was different from others, which made them respect him. Behind her calm facade, Shen Miao was doing some reflection. After overthrowing the Xie family, the Shen family would be ushering in monstrous disaster. Since the two are closely related, why not ease the situation? If the imperial family wanted to get involved, then they would have to consider if they had the ability. Saving the Xie family, saving Xie Jingxing, only with that it would the Shen family gain an additional bargaining chip. The Shen family was honest and sincere, while the Xie family was imperious and domineering. The imperial family would first deal with the Xie family, and she, perhaps, may be able to make a deal with the Xie family. Xie Jingxing rode away and finally stopped his horse in front of a tavern. He flipped down off the horse and walked to the innermost part of the tavern. In the room, there was a white-clad male so handsome that one would smile upon seeing him. Third younger brother. Take it. Xie Jingxing threw the bag in his hands over. In the future, don't find for me for such things. If it was not Gao Yang who requested that he find this whatever medical book, he would not go to Kai Lin and would not be surrounded in Guang Wentang like a fool. Thinking of that silk blossom, he felt disgusted as he patted his clothes. Gao Yang knew that this junior of his was a little odd and smiled lightly as he joked, "You should go around more with this temper of yours. These students' ages are similar to yours and you should learn to be as lively as them." He paused, and with a slight urging smile, "Perhaps there would be an adorable young lady. You are at the right age, why are you still alone all day?" Xie Jingxing was already accustomed to the straightforward and quiet nature of his senior and rode it off in a slightly impatient manner as he thought of the pair of eyes that he saw. They were a pair of clear eyes, like an animal's, with a deep sense of compassion and helplessness. That kind of look stunned him, while, afterwards, the owner looked down in a seemingly shy manner. But what kind of person was Xie Jingxing? He followed his father and traveled extensively, fought battles and killed people, so he has a trained pair of eyes. That girl was only pretending to admire him. It was unfortunate that she did not know that her eyes were like a pool of stagnant water, without a single ripple. It was truly interesting. When Shen Miao got out of the academy and returned to the Shen residence, the skies were becoming dark. Shen Yu and Shen Qing did not return together with her, and Shen Miao could not be bothered to care about them. Old Shen Furen had already gone to rest, so she went back to the west courtyard. Just as she reached the west courtyard, a warm voice called out, "Young lady has finally returned." This old servant heard that young lady had fallen into the water and was very worried. Seeing that young lady is well, this one's heart can finally be at ease. Turning her head to the side, Shen Miao saw a middle-aged woman walking over with a smile. This woman was about 40 years of age, with a somewhat fat stature, slightly darker skin, and wearing a green dress and a thick silver bracelet on her wrist. Even though it looked ordinary, the material used was good. "Gui Momo," Shen Miao faintly replied. That woman did not think she had done anything wrong and continued preaching. This old servant wanted to come over earlier, but Ran Er was ill. After much tossing and turning and seeing there was no other choice, one could only pass Ran Er to his mother and come back to the residence first. Seeing that young lady is all right, this one's heart can settle. The main point of these words was to say that Shen Miao's position in her heart was more important than her own grandson. If it was as usual, after listening to these words, Shen Miao would be greatly moved and give Gui Momo some tales to get a position for her grandson. But after her rebirth, Shen Miao almost laughed at her own naivety when she saw the woman in front of her. In the beginning, how blind was she to think that such a person was a loyal servant? Not long after Shen Furen gave birth to Shen Miao, she set off with Shen Xin. Since Shen Miao was too young and could not bear the difficulty of traveling, Shen Furen could only reluctantly leave her in Shen residence. Shen Furen hired a wet nurse for her, who was the current Gui Momo. Gui Momo was born on a farm on their estate, and at the beginning Shen Furen saw that she was diligent and honest. Afterwards, when she saw Gui Momo treating Shen Miao very well, she then felt assured to leave her at Shen Miao's side as a training Momo. But, in this world people will change. There were already very few people in West Courtyard, and the ones calling the shots were the two other households and old Shen Furen in the East Courtyard. Gui Momo initially took care of Shen Miao honestly, but after some time passed, she saw the power situation clearly and did not hesitate to defect to old Shen Furen's side. When Shen Miao was initially bent on marrying Fu Shuyi, Gui Momo fanned the flames with her flattering words. But the most detestable thing was that, in the beginning, when old Shen Furan brought her grandniece from far away to seek refuge with the Shen family, that grandniece accused eldest brother Shen Chu of ruining her innocence and insisted on getting him to take responsibility. She finally became her sister-in-law and created a mess out of eldest brother's inner courtyard. And Gui Momo was supposedly the witness to the insult Shen Chu inflicted upon this grandniece. To think about it now, it was nothing but a bad show. Once disloyal, one cannot be used for 100 times. Moreover, with such a person as Gui Momo, who was 100 times disloyal, Shen Miao naturally had to tidy things up. When dealing with a dog that ran to others, might as well kill it rather than continuing to rear it. After Gui Momo waited for a long time without hearing Shen Miao giving out a reward, the loving look on her face stiffened. She could not help but look up at Shen Miao, but only saw looking indifferent, as if it was nothing special. Her heart suddenly made a quay and dang sound. She did not know why, but she suddenly felt guilty. In the next moment she heard a short and bland answer from Shen Miao. Oh. It is really hard for Momo. Gu Yu snorted softly and looked at Gui Momo with a sneer. She had always looked down on Gui Momo for being a flattering, vile person who relied on her identity as young lady's wet nurse to throw her weight around in the west courtyard. But her own young lady was previously coaxed by this Gui Momo so well that she listened to much of what Gui Momo said and strained her relationship with many of the people in the west courtyard. It was good now. After young lady had woken up from falling into the water, it seemed that she saw many things clearly and her lukewarm attitude towards Gui Momo brought a great sense of comfort to Gu Yu. Gui Momo continued to smile stiffly as she was unable to figure out why Shen Miao was treating her with such coldness today. Thinking that Shen Miao was not happy due to the matter of falling in the water, she consoled, this servant will say a word of advice to young lady. One must not be overly sad, protecting one's health is the important thing. Young lady is as pretty as a flower and His Highness Prince Ding will definitely like you. There will always be a day, she would often say such pleasing words and would usually pick up on Shen Miao's likes to achieve her favor. But when these words were spoken today, she saw Shen Miao's face change. For Momo to say such words, is it to put a stain on my innocence? Shen Miao coldly said, although father and mother are currently not in the general's residence, I am the young lady of the general's residence and the mistress of the west courtyard. For the reputation of one's innocence, with what Momo had said, is it to deliberately trap me in the pits of fire and water? Gui Momo was surprised for a moment before she subconsciously said, how can young lady say it that way? This old servant said it for your sake. So this is saying it is my fault. Shen Miao coldly laughed, this is also good. Why not ask old Furan if the innocence of a daughter from the general's residence is as valuable as a cabbage? Even a cabbage is worth a few coins. Gui Momo, for you to be so honest, I want to ask if I was overly shameless. Perhaps she did not expect that Shen Miao would seize the momentum and take her bad mood out on her. Gui Momo was already used to being a tyrant in the west courtyard and normally she could control Shen Miao very well, but today, to be brought down a peg in front of Gu Yu and Jing Jie, she was somewhat angry and could not help saying, young lady's words are making this slave look evil. This old slave has followed by young lady's side for more than 10 years. Why would young lady think that this old servant would deliberately harm others? Insolent, Jing Jie loudly shouted, young lady is the mistress, how dare Gui Momo speak to young lady like that? Gui Momo was so surprised and upset that she became too agitated just now. But words were like water that was poured out and could not be retrieved, and there were so many servants around watching the commotion. She could only treat Shen Miao as an easily coaxed young girl and quickly said in a soft voice, young lady, this old servant truly does feel distress for young lady. This old servant has followed young lady for so many years and has already taken young lady as one's own child. What this old servant said was not correct. Young lady mustn't get angry and cause harm to the body. Taken her as her own child. Shen Miao sneered in her heart. She felt that this Gui Momo was a genius. Usually she would receive a lot of gold from the west courtyard but treated the east courtyard as the official master. In the end, she made her eldest brother eat up such a huge disadvantage. If it was her previous lifetime in the palace, she would have gotten someone to beat up and kill a servant like this. But now, since Gui Momo had the heart to join the east courtyard, how about using her hands to let them suffer a huge loss? She raised her eyebrows as she spoke in a light tone, since Gui Momo knows, then one will only punish with 3 months of salary. Gui Momo's facial expression stiffened as a smile appeared on Shen Miao's lips. What would Gui Momo do when there was no more money? Naturally, pledge her loyalty to the east courtyard. A cool breeze started up during the night as autumn neared, turning the weather cooler by the day. The Ding capital was in the north, making the cold more surprising. Under the candlelight, the young female held a book, reading it slowly as she reclined against the couch. She did not realize that the tea beside her had turned cold as she continued reading her book in a trance. Bai Lu stared blankly at her young lady. It was as if in a short span of one night, her mistress had become different from before. Even quietly reading as she was now would be unusual as Shen Miao previously hated to read. But with the way things were now, if she did not know that it was her own young lady, Bai Lu would have thought that she had come across a noble Furan. Bai Lu did not really understand how a young lady would have such an imposing manner as she stood dazedly in her position. She only recovered when Shuangzhang strode over and nudged her to reprimand softly, standing here foolishly for what? Shuangzhang then walked over to place a cloak around Shen Miao and warmly advised, young lady, it seems that the time is no longer early and there is a need to go to Guangwentang tomorrow. It would be better to rest early. Shen Miao shook her head, go and rest first, I will read for a while longer. What kind of reasoning would there be for a mistress to not sleep while her maid rested? Shuangzhang could not do anything. She wanted to persuade her again but was held back by Gu Yu who was changing the tea and pulled out to the outer room with Bai Lu. Gu Yu, what is it? Bai Lu did not understand. Young lady's health just recovered. Why did you not go up to persuade her to rest? How did I not persuade? Gu Yu's head ached. Would the current young lady listen to my words? She has been reading books for an entire day and I suspect it should be the homework from her teacher and young lady has made up her mind to complete it tonight. What other choice do I have? She glanced back to the room worriedly. When Shen Miao was formerly timid, she would always want the advice of others. Now that she was no longer timid, when she made up her mind, no one dared refute. As she was serving close by, Gu Yu felt one would not dare to refuse any of Shen Miao's orders. Just speaking plainly like that would also reveal an imposing stance. Even when Master flew into a rage, it wasn't as scary as this, Gu Yu sighed. In the room, Shen Miao was still reading. She was seriously studying the contents of the book and did not leave any detail behind. If one were to look closely, they would have found that the book she was holding was Mingqi Official Annals. Other than the big events that had occurred from the founding of the country to the current Mingqi, she was only familiar with the events that would happen in the next few decades and decided to prepare some methods to prevent the tragedies from happening. As an enemy's enemy is one's friend, she had to find out who were the vassal families and what their current situations were. If these vassal families reached their end, it would soon be the Shen family's turn. The steps the emperor took to eradicate these families were much nearer. As for what Shen Miao remembered, if there was no other mishaps, there would be a big catastrophe next month. Before Shen Qin returned, only she could support Shen residents while she also had to defend against those wolves from the east courtyard. As Shen Miao presumed, that night Gui Momo took the specialties that she had brought back from her trip to visit Rong Jingtang. After she entered, Zhang Mama, who worked by old Shen Fern's side, was pulled away by her as Gui Momo kept talking about Shen Miao's disobedient ways and how she would frequently lash out with words of anger. How would Zhang Mama not understand her intentions? After accompanying her to speak a few rather neutral words, Gui Momo asked Zhang Mama to put in a good word for her with old Shen Fern before leaving. Just as she left Rong Jingtang courtyard, Ren Wanyan's maid Xiang Lan walked over and smiled. Gui Momo, I was looking for you. Oh, when Gui Momo squinted her eyes to see better and saw Xiang Lan, she also smiled. Why is Miss Xiang Liang looking for me? It is of no big matter. Xiang Lan came next to Gui Momo and tugged her arm. It was that our mistress heard that you know a place that sells rouge and the rouge was especially pretty, thus one looked for you to ask where can it be bought. This was obviously an excuse indicating that Ren Wanyan was looking for Gui Momo to have some private words. Gui Momo was well aware of it and went along with Xiang Lan. This is a small matter. If Madam wants to listen, I will tell Madam the place. Speaking of that rouge, many of the young ladies and madams of official families love to use it. Following Xiang Lan to Kai Yun Yuan, she noticed the maids outside had already been sent away. Ren Wanyan sat on the couch. As second Shen master was still outside entertaining and had yet to return, she was casually doing some needlework and was most likely embroidering the edge of a pouch while she ate from a plate of grapes beside her. This was a rare item as one would not be able to find any grapes in Ding capital at this time of year. Only second master had the ability to obtain a basket of them to let the females in his own courtyard eat. Gui Momo spat in her heart. Although the second household did not ill-treat the first household on the surface, whatever Shen Miao used and ate only looked magnificent on the outside but were actually things that even merchant families were unable to sell off. On the topic of food, Shen Miao would not even have the opportunity to have grapes. As she was thinking, Ren Wanyan finally put down the needlework in her hand and said, Gui Momo. Gui Momo quickly recovered herself and answered, Mistress, this old servant is here. Ren Wanyan was already 40 years old and even though she had maintained herself excellently, there were still fine lines at the corners of her eyes. But when she sat there, wearing clothes cut from good material and with manners like a Fern in charge of the household, even if she smiled, there was some imposing appearance. She said, I heard that you had returned. As little Five's Heath has only just recovered, you need to take good care of her. Gui Momo jeered in her heart, who did not know that the east courtyard couldn't wait for the west courtyard to be in trouble. How would Ren Wanyan have such good intentions? This was all to pull the wool over other people's eyes. Sure enough, Ren Wanyan continued, in these few days, little Five has probably been unhappy regarding the matter of falling into the water and since eldest brother and sister are not around, as only a Shen, whatever I do will be wrong. If one were to hear anything, it could only be heard from you. This meant that Ren Wanyan wanted Gui Momo to report Shen Miao's every move to her. Gui Momo quickly said, it is fifth young lady's fortune to have madam's concern. But from what this old servant sees, fifth young lady is indeed angry about the matter of falling into the water. The situation these recent days has changed quite a bit, even to the point where she has also distanced herself from this old servant. Not touching on other matters, just today, this old servant was punished and lost 3 months of salary for nothing. She frowned. This old servant heard that fifth young lady had fallen into the water and was so anxious that one did not care if one's grandson was still sick but who knew that fifth young lady would lash out at this old servant, making it so this old servant's heart could not beat ease. Ren Wanyan was somewhat impatient listening to unrelated matters and asked, at the end, it is still because of her heart. Then what is Gui Momo's view? Was there any change in attitude from little Five pertaining to His Highness Prince Ding? This was what she wanted to ask the most. Gui Momo's eyes turned and she said, fifth young lady seems to want to draw a line with His Highness Prince Ding and did not want this old servant to mention those matters today. But this old servant has followed fifth young lady for so many years and understands her temper. With regards to the issue of His Highness Prince Ding, fifth young lady would not give up this easily. These words were only a young female's exasperation and cannot be taken as the truth. After the words were spoken, a look of ruthlessness appeared on Ren Wanyan's face. After Gui Momo left, Shen Qing walked out from behind the dividing screen. She climbed up to Ren Wanyan's side and clung onto her mother as she spoke with a tone that was unable to hide the anger. Mother, Shen Miao is not willing to give up His Highness Prince Ding. What should I do? Among the 3 household in Shen family, the first household was undoubtedly holding the highest official position and it is very possible if Shen Miao would ask Shen Qin to request a marriage for her. But she also loved Prince Ding, so what was she considered as if Shen Miao succeed? His Highness Prince Ding was such a handsome and talented person, how can he be possessed by a stupid and ignorant Shen Miao? Every time she thought about this, Shen Qing could not resign her heart to it 100 times. Rest assures, in this Shen residence, no one can be bigger than you. Ren Wanyan said, Shen Miao has a stupid character and there is nothing to fear about her. Your mother naturally has ways to let her not marry His Highness Prince Ding, but it is you, she sighed, there is no harm in seriously looking at the people from Chu Shui Yuan. You really think that the second girl is a good person? You have such thoughts but second girl may not have it. Shen Qing wrinkled her brows, she also loved His Highness Prince Ding. How is it possible? Shen Qing said, even if she truly likes His Highness Prince Ding, third Chu's rank is not higher than eldest beau and naturally would not be able to say anything. No matter how one see, it cannot be anything to fear from. Ren Wanyan pointed at Shen Qing's head as she rebuked, how can I rest assured with you? Your third Shen is a formidable person, in the beginning your third Shu, seemingly realizing that these words should not be said in front of children, Ren Wanyan suddenly kept quiet. She only said, in short, you need not take fifth girl at heart as mother will naturally handle the matter. Thanking mother, Shen Qing sweetly said. Both mother and daughter smiled. Inside Chu Shui Yuan, Chen Ruchu was sitting at the table writing. She was a female from a scholarly family and had unbounded talents. Even though she was a married woman, she still often liked to read books and calligraphy. Shen Yu stood behind her, clad in a yellow dress that made her body slim, just like a younger version of Chen Ruchu. Mother, why did you said that to Gui Momo? She could not help to ask after a long time. Gui Momo came over once but unexpectedly Chen Ruchu did not only prevent Gui Momo from stopping Shen Miao to continue to be in love with His Highness Prince Ding, she also let Gui Momo advise Shen Miao that His Highness Prince Ding was a good place to be married to. Won't this make her more determined to marry His Highness Prince Ding? Shen Yu complained. Chen Ruchu placed the brush down and gently sighed before pulling Shen Yu's hands to the couch to sit and said, didn't mother tell you before that whatever things that one does, especially within this house, must be done in a big round. This is that if anything would to happen in the future, one would blame the heavens and earth but would not blame you. Shen Yu shook her head, mother, I do not understand. Chen Ruchu smiled. This daughter of hers was gentle and talented and she was also not stupid but she was after all too young. It was most likely third master Shen doted on her too much thus she did not know how dangerous the inner courtyard was. It was unlike her in the beginning, when she was in the minister's residence, there were a bunch of older and younger sisters, yin-yangs and concubines. Which one of them was easy to deal with? That was why after she was married, she firmly grasped third master Shen in the palm of her hands. But the most regrettable thing was that she was unable to give birth to a son. No matter how much third master Shen doted on her, if there was no son, it meant that there was no weight at her side. Sooner or later the third master Shen would need to give the concubine soup to ensure no birth. At that time, what a scene would it be? So she must educate this daughter very well. What do you think of little five? She asked softly. Shen Yu thought for a while and replied, she doesn't know anything about accounting or current affairs, not good at the four scholarly arts, and she is stupid and ignorant and is not articulate. If it was not for eldest Bo's reputation, no one would give her any face. Even its Shu daughters would also have more bearing than her. If anyone were to hear it, they would be shocked. These words of demeaning Shen Miao to be worthless actually came out from her gentle and soft Tang Jia. From what everyone knew, Shen Miao's best friend was Shen Yu. Perhaps it was like this in the past. Chen Ruchu shook her head, but after falling into the water, from the way I see, little five has changed a lot. Why does mother say that? Shen Yu was puzzled. Chen Ruchu also did not know why there was such a feeling. Perhaps it was the peak words that a little girl said in a moment of anger, but Chen Ruchu had seen a lot of people and thus as compared to her self-declared astute second sister-in-law, she saw it clearly that Shen Miao became smarter. Her dialogue with old Fern at Rong Jingtang, as well as the appearance was very much different than before. Could it be that the matter with Prince Ding had gave her such a big blow, or was it that there was an expert helping her? In any case, one must not take it lightly at all. Perhaps it was because of the attack from Prince Ding. But mother has spoken to you before, a smart female would not deal with other female. She would only deal with men. Chen Ruchu's voice was soft and gentle like she was singing, since you are committed to His Highness Prince Ding, why should your sights be on Shen Miao? No matter how much power your eldest Bo has, in this world, there was no logic that a man would adore a stupid and ignorant female. His Highness Prince Ding is a royalty, and if he were to really marry such an unbearable female, won't that be the greatest joke under the skies? But, Shen Yu felt some grievances. Listen to mother's words. You must not only not alienate from little five but also be friends with her like before. You have to double up the hard work so that everyone can see your talent and beauty. The more outstanding you are, it would appear that she is more stupid and foolish. Chen Ruchu smiled as though she was saying general things, but each word exposed her hidden motives. I let Gui Momo persuade her to continue to be in love with Prince Ding so that the stupid girl would wholeheartedly dive in, and that would be her laughing stock. Thus His Highness Prince Ding would only be doubly disgusted with her. So in this way, Shen Yu seemed to understand a little. Chen Ruchu stroked her head. You are a clever child and should be able to understand mother's intention. So you have to persuade her to continue to love Prince Ding and also make a fool of herself in front of Prince Ding. It is only by doing so, His Highness Prince Ding would notice the more outstanding you. Even if everyone under the skies wants His Highness Prince Ding to marry little five, you will still win if the person in His Highness Prince Ding's heart is you. Mother, to say such a thing out loud, Shen Yu embarrassingly buried her head into Chen Ruchu's arms. I understand. Chen Ruchu smiled. In the beginning, there were also many obstructions to the marriage to third Shen Master, and that time third Shen Master was considered handsome and talented, thus there were many matchmakers that went over to discuss about marriage. Why she was only selected? It was because there was an encounter at the temple where she was wearing a white dress playing chin under a tree, and third Master Shen heard it. Third Master Shen took her as a celestial being and insisted on marrying her as his wife when he returned. Third Master Shen loved to listen the chin, and his favorite color is white. See, so many females were fighting, but it was her that became the final winner, and it was because she knew from the beginning that she was only dealing with one man. So what of the 3D daughters of Shen family? Only her can deal with His Highness Prince Ding. No matter what the East Courtyard did, Shen Miao still deliberately alienated the people from both the second and third household. She no longer attached herself to Shen Yu and Shen Qing either. At first, everyone in Shen residence thought that she was only throwing a childish tantrum about the matter of falling into the water, but when Shen Miao started to conduct matters her own way, everyone felt that something was not right. Gui Momo persuaded Shen Miao as usual not to be angry with the East Courtyard and occasionally mentioned how Prince Ding was a peerless man in Mingqi. But Shen Miao seemed to be unshakable, as every time Gui Momo mentioned that person, she would berate her furiously, giving Gui Momo a headache. However, the West Courtyard was still filled with crafty servants from the second and third household, and Gu Yu and the rest thought that since Shen Miao's temper had changed, she would rearrange the matters in the inner courtyard. Who knew that Shen Miao would actually ignore it? Naturally, Shen Miao had her own plans. These past few days, she had been going to Guangwentang more diligently. Even though everyone viewed her like she was the lowest of the low, she was not angry and only did her things well. The more magnanimous she was, the more others would feel bored, hence she was able to have some days of peace. After literary classes ended that day, Shen Miao felt some tightness in her chest, so she headed to the garden in Guangwentang for a casual walk. Although Guangwentang was an academy, it covered quite a vast area. There were 3 different grades, level 1, 2 and 3, and though Shen Miao was in level 2 because of her age, she unknowingly went to the level 1 area. By coincidence, she saw a young boy sitting on the steps wiping away his tears. This child looked around 12 years old and was fair and plump. Perhaps his body was too bloated, as one would think he was a rounded ball at first glance. He was clad in a blue robe lined with silver, a pair of small boots and a collar around his neck. Just like a doll from a New Year painting. Shen Miao was slightly stunned and she walked over to say softly, "Why are you crying?" That doll did not think that someone would come over suddenly and was so surprised that he rolled down the steps with a putong. He did not cry, but sat up and looked at Shen Miao blankly. He was naturally fair and plump, with a pair of sparkling eyes and a small crease on his head. With tears still on his face, he looked charmingly naive. Shen Miao could not help but burst out in laughter. That boy called out in a childlike manner, "Older sister." Shen Miao's heart almost melted when he called her. She gave birth to Wan Yu and Fu Ming in her past lifetime, but she was already in the Qin country as a hostage until they were 5. When she returned, both children had already learned their etiquette and obediently called her imperial mother. Shen Miao herself did not know what her 2 children were like before the age of 5. Even though this child was older and seemed ignorant of the ways of the world, he reminded her of Wan Yu and Fu Ming. Shen Miao slightly bent down to pat his head. "What are you crying for?" "The teacher asked me a question and I could not answer, so I was hit on my palm." The child took his hands out, revealing red palms as he said in distress, "It is very painful." Shen Miao wanted to tease him, so she continued asking, "What question did the teacher ask?" "The teacher wanted me to write the words 'the fox grieves when the rabbit dies,' but I am unable to do it," the child cried. If one was old enough to go into level 1 in the academy and did not know to write from memory, it would be somewhat unjustifiable. Disregarding Shen Miao herself, a noble child in Mingqi at this age would have started to learn to deal with the political affairs at court. Even if it was only pretending to make contacts, many could more or less cope with it. Though the youths in the imperial family would mature faster, the children studying in Guangwentang were all from aristocratic families and would not mature that slowly. That child seemed to have not complained enough and continued to chirp. "If I was to return and father was to learn about it, he would severely punish me. What meaning is there for me to live? It would be better to just die." Shen Miao was a little shocked by the tone of the child's voice, but she also found it a bit funny. Thinking of which family this lively treasure came from and where he learned such a dramatic statement from, she asked, "Which family's child are you?" The boy looked at Shen Miao. Although she just passed 14 years of age, with her youthful appearance, she looked as old as this child. But for some unknown reason there was an indescribable air around her, as if she had seen great winds and high waves and could calm people down with just her presence. Even this child involuntarily quieted down and told her his background. I am the second young master of the Ping Nan Bo's family in the capital, Su Ming Lang. My father is Ping Nan Bo, Su Yu, and my eldest brother is Ping Nan Bo's heir, Su Ming Feng. He actually came clean about it and detailed his own family background clearly. Shen Miao was surprised for a moment. The Su family, Ping Nan Bo. No matter if it was her past life or this life, the Su family and the Shen family had no association as they had opposing political views. The Su family had a good relationship with the Xie family. Ping Nan Bo, Su Yu and Marquis of Linen, Xie Ding were very good brothers while Su Mingfeng and Xie Jingxing were friends that had played together since childhood. What was the extent of their relationship? When Su Mingfeng died, only Xie Jingxing dared to collect his corpse. Yes, Su Mingfeng died. More precisely, it can be said that the entire Su family perished. The late emperor dug out evidence of the Su family's involvement in a conspiracy to sell military horses. As for the matter of military horses, once they were involved, there was no room for any leeway at all. The imperial edict came suddenly and swiftly. They were not even given a trial before the army directly confiscated their possessions and executed them immediately. In the middle of the day, the entire Su family's blood flowed from the east to the west of the Ding capital. By the time Xie Jingxing knew about it, it was too late as none of the Su family survived. Those who had a good relationship with them did not appear at all, and it was Xie Jingxing who personally collected the corpse of the Su family members before going to the late emperor to plead guilty of his offenses and requested burial for them with regards to the meritorious services that the Su family once did for Mingqi. The late emperor allowed it, thus the funeral for the Su family was single-handedly organized by the Xie family. Shen Miao remembered very clearly that Shen Shen sighed for a period of time after learning of the matter upon his return at the end of that year. The Su family's demise would occur in about 2 months. It would be soon that this innocent and ignorant child would also lose his life due to that cold imperial edict. Her expression suddenly became a little cold and her eyes faintly glowed. Su Minglang could not help but shrink back a little. When Shen Miao looked back at him, her tone was just as gentle as before. Su Mingfeng. Is he the heir of the Su family that completed a great meritorious service recently and managed the military horses excellently? Yes. The child held his head up high and replied, Father said that His Majesty would definitely reward eldest brother with a rank this time. Shen Miao smiled as she leaned towards the child to softly say, You said that if your father knew that you were unable to answer the teacher's question, you would be punished. I have a method that would allow you to escape punishment. What is it? The child blinked as he asked. You have to promise me that you will not tell them that it was I who told you, then I will speak. The child thought for a long while before nodding. All right. The Su family was a large clan that was a level above the other clans as only high-ranking officials were able to hold the position of managing the matters of the military horse and their rations. Su family's status of managing the military horses was already in place since the founding of Mingqi and was managed very well. Ping Nan Bo, Su Yu, was no exception. From his perspective, the Su family was splendid and would certainly continue on for a long time. Perhaps loyal officials would have thought that as long as one was to faithfully work, the imperial family would not treat them unfairly. But since the ancient times, accompanying one's sovereign was like accompanying a tiger. In this world, who would be able to predict it clearly? Su Yu would be 40 years old when the year ends and could be considered quite loving to his furin. Even though he had a few concubines, they only gave birth to daughters. Since there were only 2 sons, he was always very strict with their education. His eldest son, Su Mingfeng, started to serve in the government at a young age and, similar to him, was in charge of the military horses and in fact did better than Su Yu in this half a year. Just some time ago, Su Mingfeng collaborated with the veterinarians in the Imperial Medical Court and reformed some guidelines regarding the military horses, and because of that, the number of war horses that died due to plague dropped by half. This was a great merit. After the military statistics were put up next month, Su Mingfeng would definitely be rewarded. Bestowing rewards was secondary, the main thing was that this represented glory and honor. Su Yu was past his prime, and currently Su Mingfeng was of the right age when the son should succeed his father's career, thus it was time to expand Su Mingfeng's reputation. If Su Mingfeng was so outstanding, maybe he would become the next confidant and talent of the heir apparent to the throne. Su Yu was naturally happy because of his remarkable eldest son, but his youngest son gave him a headache. Probably because his youngest son was only born when his furin was rather old, thus his furin doted him a lot and he developed a spoiled personality. Not to mention about being as outstanding as his oldest son, even when compared to his peers, he would be found lacking. As Su Minglang was not the eldest son, naturally he need not inherit the title of heir, so it did not matter if he was a little dumb. But Su Yu had an unbending personality and would not tolerate any deficiency in his own son. In order to correct this, he would test his homework after Su Minglang returned from the academy each day. His little son would suffer the reprimands and his furin would cover up his shortcomings, making it seem like all hell would break loose. But this day, Su Yu was in the study discussing some things with Su Mingfeng. Both father and son had endless things to talk about on the topic of military horses. Master Su was elated. To have such an outstanding son, what could he be unsatisfied with? As they discussed, they started to talk about Su Mingfeng's bestowment in the following month. In my opinion, this time His Majesty will definitely confer an official title. For the time being, don't mention bestowment of precious stones or whatever, father is only hoping your career will be more stable. Now that the Xiongnu have begun to stir, attention needs to be on the military horses. Mingfeng, as long as you are able to obtain His Majesty's high regard, in the future, the Su family can only go further. Your younger brother is still young, so you still need to carry the Su family on your shoulders. Su Mingfeng nodded his head in agreement. He was in his youth and there was an upright and awe-inspiring look to his brows. However, his eyes could not help but reveal a little pride as it was the period where youths were determined not to fall short of expectations. Not only from the affirmation from his father, he was elated that the importance of the matters he managed had been steadily increasing. Both father and son were in a good mood when the servant at the door announced, Master, second young master has returned. It was just at that time when second young master Su Minglang returned from the academy. Every day when Su Minglang finished his lessons, he would always be called into Master Su's study to be tested on what he learned, and there was no exception today. Master Su was suppressing the beginnings of a headache as he first looked at his outstanding oldest son, then looked at his second son who was as stupid as a little pig and felt that it was somewhat comical. Every day, Su Minglang came to the study and by the end Su Yu would roll in anger. Today was no different. Su Minglang slowly entered the study and his lips curled up as he called out, Father. Eldest brother. He was just like a little round ball, silly yet adorable. Su Mingfeng stroked his younger brother's head. Minglang, did everything go well in class today? Su Minglang pursed his lips and did not speak. Every time he did that, it would mean that it did not go well, not one bit. He had been reprimanded by his teacher. Master Su put on a stern face and ordered, extend your palm out. Su Minglang shrank back a bit and stretched out his hands in misery. One could see a few red marks on the fair and tender palms. If these weren't the strokes of a ruler, what else could they be? Master Su had a look of expectation, but it was Su Mingfeng that felt anguished for his younger brother as he asked, how could this teacher beat this heavily? He is just a child. It is all of your coddling that spoiled him to this level. Master Su flew into a rage after he heard his oldest son and angrily asked, what went wrong today? Little Su Minglang hesitated before speaking apprehensively. The teacher asked me to write about the fox grieves when the rabbit dies, but I was unable to memorize it. How do you want me to scold you? Master Su had a look of pain in his face. You can't even memorize words. Look at the other young masters at your age. Which one of them are like you? When your eldest brother was your age, he was already reading books on military horses. The face of our Su family has almost been completely thrown away by you. Su Mingfeng was about to try to persuade his father when he heard his second younger brother sobbing out. Even though I was unable to memorize the fox grieves when the rabbit dies, I was able to memorize boiling the hound once the rabbit is caught, and it is longer by 2 words in the Chinese wording, 4 words vs 6 words. Since both have the same meaning, isn't it the same if one were to memorize boiling the hound once the rabbit is caught? What nonsense. Master Su simply did not know what else to say. Su Mingfeng smiled and said, second younger brother, these 2 phrases do not have the same meaning. Then what do they mean? Su Minglang raised his head to ask. The meaning of the fox grieves when the rabbit dies is that the rabbit died and the fox realized that it would suffer the same fate and felt sad. But boiling the hound once the rabbit is caught means that once the rabbit was killed and the hunting dog had no more value, it would be cooked. It means to say that once a thing has no more value and is of no more interest, then the tool can be discarded. Boiling the hound once the rabbit is caught and destroying the bridge after crossing the river are somewhat similar. Su Mingfeng was a good elder brother as he patiently answered his younger brother's question. But Su Minglang shook his head and still had a look of confusion. Since both happen after the rabbit is dead, it should be treated the same. Anyways, the rabbit is dead. Su Mingfeng was about to explain but saw his father suddenly look shocked as he softly repeated, the rabbit is dead. Yes. Su Minglang opened his palm out as his plump rounded face looked innocent yet stubborn. Anyhow, both rabbits are dead. Isn't the meaning that once the rabbit dies, the fox and dog will be out of luck? Since everyone is out of luck, then both phrases should still mean the same thing. It was the natural order to boil the hound once the rabbit was caught. For a fable to be won, there was definitely a basis on the major principles in life. The rabbit died, but the fox was cleverer than the hound and would have seen his own ending. But who was the hunting hound? What would be the outcome of the hound that helped its master hunt for the rabbit? Su Yu's expression gradually sank. A major event occurred in early October. Su Mingfeng, the eldest young master Su, the heir of the Nanping Bo family in the Ding capital, suddenly came down with a serious illness and had to recuperate at home. King Nanbo's heart ached for his favorite son, so he and his Furen stayed at home to take care of the eldest young master Su, temporarily disregarding matters on the military horses. His Majesty bestowed some things to express his sympathy before arranging a new official to take over the management matters. The people of Ding capital all sighed with regret over this turn of events. Eldest young master Su was a talented youth who had achieved a great merit shortly after becoming an official, but just when his future seemed limitless and his rise meteoric, he suddenly succumbed to this serious illness. Even if one was a talented genius, if 3 to 5 years passed before his return, there would no longer be a foothold for him in court. The commoners saw it as such, but his colleagues in court were uncertain. Some wise people said, this isn't any illness, it is obviously avoiding a disaster. Originally, one would think that this Su family had been adding oil onto the blaze only to find out that the fire would burn them up. Who would have thought that they would see the situation clearly and take such a drastic measure to deal with it? Shen Miao was pruning the begonia flowers in the middle of the courtyard when these things reached her ears. These days in Guangwentang, as everyone had something new to say about the eldest young master Su, no one paid much attention to her. As a result, she had a few rare days of leisure. Young lady now likes all these plants. Gu Yu smiled as she said, this begonia flower blooms really well. The deep red begonia flower's petals gave a bit of color to the bleakness of autumn. When she was the empress, she was learning to manage the inner palace, helping Fu Shuyi win over the officials, was a hostage in Qin country and fought with Mei Furen. Most of the time she was living in the midst of manipulations and quarrels. How would she have the mood to casually prune flowers? Do you know why the begonia blossoms so brilliantly? She asked. Even though Gu Yu did not understand why young lady would ask such a question, she still replied with a smile, this is from the seeds that the steward bought from outside. It was said that they were expensive seeds. Furen also praised that this type of begonia looks particularly good in the autumn. Shen Miao gently shook her head. How would that be the reason? Just like the palace, the land of cold and gloom, even the flowers outside the cold palace were all exquisite. It was because under those flowers laid many bones. In this world, there would always be the darkest reasons for the brightest things. The Su family has realized this principle. What would they do now? She smiled slightly. In the residence of King Nanbo. The courtyard of eldest young Master Su was so tightly guarded that other than the close servants and family, no one else could enter. One could only smell the heavy scent of medication as Master Su closed the doors to all guests and refused to see any outsiders. As the good friend of the Su heir, little Marquis Xie naturally paid the sick person a visit. The Xie family's carriage was parked outside the Su residence and the servants were moving the herbs down in great difficulty. These herbs were all placed in wooden boxes and it could be seen that the little Marquis had very good intentions towards his good friend. In the study, Su Mingfeng wore a green robe. Other than some weight loss, his spirit was as energetic as usual. Where were the traces of a serious illness? The brocade-clad youth who was facing him tightened his brows and asked, avoiding a disaster. Exactly. Su Mingfeng glanced at his good friend and sighed. Now you see that the Su family's situation is getting better and better even as it has had an unbroken streak for generations. Thus, with regard to the matters on the military horses, there should not be any further promotions. But His Majesty did not suppress, but instead flattered the Su family. You also made a contribution. Xie Jingxing reminded him. It was because of the meritorious contribution that father and I had become rather complacent and forgot the danger hidden behind it. When the merits get too big, it becomes a curse. The things I said, you understand. But because Su family was in the situation, one's eyes would be obscured by a single leaf. Now that everything has become clear, one must rein in the horse at the edge of the precipice as it is just too dangerous. Doing this is also good. Xie Jingxing nodded his head, but you now need to stay at home for a few years in vain. I only want the Su family to be safe and sound, Su Mingfeng stated. Enough talking about me, how about talking about you? Su family and Xie family enjoy the ups and downs together. Since the Su family has acted in the nick of time, your Xie family, he did not continue on. Xie Jingxing's eyebrows rose. What can he do to me if I do not serve as an official? There is only one Marquis of Linen in the Xie family, he has to take into account everyone's words. Xie Jingxing and Su Mingfeng were different. Because of the Su family, Su Yu had gotten his son to serve as an official early on. But Xie Jingxing did not do so, therefore he only had a leisure post to his name. Many campaigns that he went on with Xie Ding was only as a family member. Even if the Imperial family wanted to suppress the Xie family, they would not beat down a son that would not take over the family clan. You do have deep plans and distant thoughts. Su Mingfeng could not help but laugh. I did not do it to guard against him, Xie Jingxing lazily said. He truly did not guard against the imperial family, he simply did it to go against his father. However, he frowned and suddenly turned the conversation around. How did you suddenly figure out this matter? The previous times that I had reminded you, you did not take it to heart. Su Mingfeng bowed his head in shame. Emotions ran high and one became complacent, so how would one think that much? This time it was all thanks to my second younger brother. Your second younger brother, Xie Jingxing, who was leaning against the chair lazily, sat up straight as a look flashed in his eyes. That glutinous rice dumpling. That Su Minglang was a stupid dumpling and that was nothing strange, but how was he able to remind the Su family of these matters unless he had taken the wrong medicine? Su Mingfeng explained the ins and outs of everything before saying, if it wasn't second younger brother who acted without thinking, maybe we would have walked into a disaster. Acted without thinking, Xie Jingxing murmured to himself. Just at that time, a tender voice sounded, eldest brother, mother let me bring you some snacks. Su Minglang was carrying a flower-shaped pastry as he walked in with his short little legs. He looked like a round, glutinous ball and his mouth was covered with a lot of crumbs. He had apparently been secretly eating a lot of it on the way over. These days, because of his inadvertent reminder, the Su family changed their tactics and even Master Su, who was most satisfied with him, for the first time felt that his son would be a powerful person, was intelligent and nimble and that great intelligence may appear to be stupid. Su Furan also made a lot of food for him to eat and, in just a short few days, Su Minglang had grown even rounder. When he saw that Xie Jingxing was still present, he could not help but lower his voice. He did not know why, but he was always somewhat afraid of this handsome friend of his eldest brother. Su Minglang placed the snacks on the table and turned to run away after saying, eldest brother, I am leaving. He did not think that someone would grab a hold of his collar. He turned back and saw the brocade-clad youth gently squat down and pat his head with a pair of vivid and smiling eyes, but his eye expression was incomparably cold. He asked, who taught you that sentence? Su Minglang stared wide-eyed. Boil the hound once the rabbit is caught. Xie Jingxin smiled extremely wickedly. The days were always gone too quickly. With the weather turning colder, the students of Guangwentang began to prepare for the academy examinations that would be held at the end of the month. The young males did it so that they could be officials and the young females did it to show off their talents to increase their value when they married in the future or so prospective matches would take a fancy to them. This was what the noble children must do. Even pampered females like Feng and Ning also started to work harder these days, much less Shen Qing and Shen Yu. Shen Yu especially composed poetry and played the chin in the east courtyard all day long as she looked forward to being in the limelight again this year. Shen Yu and Shen Qing were already 15 and according to tradition, it was the time where the two families would meet. The females in Mingqi would be married around the age of 16, so they could be engaged at the age of 15. Shen Qing and Shen Yu did not settle it for a long time because they had set their eyes very high and looked down on those of the same status. But it would be somewhat not knowing what was good for themselves if they set it too high. In the end, these two households resolutely fixed their sights on Prince Ding. Of the 9 sons of the late emperor, only the 9th, Prince Ding, had yet to marry. He was just in his early 20s and it was the perfect time to get married. But, because of various reasons, the prince consort position was still undecided. Like a hanging piece of meat, Prince Ding would personally be there as an examiner in the academy examinations. This made many young ladies put in more energy and effort as they hoped to leave a good impression in front of Prince Ding and wished that his highness would fall for them at first sight. Shen Miao, however, had no intention of doing that. Even with another lifetime, she was still not a woman of romance. She did not know how to compose poetry or perform any dance. Obviously she could not stand on the stage to talk about the major national issues. Moreover, she did not want to have any association with Prince Ding. In her past lifetime, Prince Ding used her Shen family, harmed her children and massacred her entire clan. This was a debt that needed to be paid sooner or later. Since there was a blood debt, how can they be husband and wife in this life? Feng and Ning asked her, why are you not reading? Seeing that the end of the month is here, if you do not buck up, aren't you letting others laugh their teeth off? Shen Miao fell into the water and afterwards had quieted down a lot. Feng and Ning thought that she started to understand things properly, but today it seemed that there was no difference from how it was previously. She was still that stupid and ignorant student. Shen Miao said, one would not understand anyhow, why waste additional time? Yi Pei Lan, who was listening to the remarks at the side, laughed and sneered, it's nothing more than mud not sticking to the wall. Shen Yu was talking to Shen Qing at that moment and pretended as though she did not hear the words spoken here and did not come to her rescue. These days, Shen Miao did not please them as she did previously, so they were unhappy about it in their hearts and were anxious to see Shen Miao embarrass herself. Shen Miao, however, seemed not to have heard Yi Pei Lan's words and stood up, I will go for a walk in the garden. When she had left, Yi Pei Lan then curled her lip in disgust, only escaping when she has nothing to say, truly as timid as a mouse. Have you said enough? Feng and Ning's brows pinched, what is so good about having knowledge? Since level 2, she was imposing and pampered at home. Yi Pei Lan did not want to create trouble with her, so she kept quiet. Shen Miao reached the gardens and walked slowly around. Guangwentang was a place of elegance and the garden's greenery, pond, rock formation and construction were done up beautifully. As one walked into the bamboo forest, one would be able to smell a fragrance which could make one's heart feel refreshed. She only wanted some quiet time for herself. The people in level 2 were only young impetuous kids, and she had already been a mother in the past lifetime. Many times, as the empress, other than receiving the greetings of various concubines, she would need to spend most of her time in her own Fengyi palace. After being accustomed to quiet isolation and emptiness, she was too lazy to deal with a group of kids making a ruckus, be it ridiculing or getting ridiculed. In the end, she did not care about them. As she was walking, she saw a snow-white glutinous rice dumpling appear in front of her. The small dumpling clad in ivory satin robes was standing under the bamboo. The clothes that should be very beautiful were deformed by the round body shape, and the hat on his head was creased and crumpled, making the entire look seem funny and ridiculous. Su Minglang, she softly called. When the dumpling heard his name, he quickly turned around. When he saw Shen Miao, a look of pleasant surprise appeared. He seemed to want to rush off, but stopped hesitantly and did not speak as he watched Shen Miao. This child really did look like a 4 or 5-year-old baby, which made Shen Miao's head ache. Could it be that he took her as a mother? When Su Minglang saw Shen Miao, he pursed his lips like he wanted to say something yet did not dare to speak. Afterwards, his eyes started to redden as he softly cried, I'm sorry. Sorry, Shen Miao was slightly blanked out when she saw the dumpling's mouth tremble as he was about to cry with grievance. The next moment, a lazy voice rang out. So it was you. 1 to 18. So it was you. A handsome youth walked out of the bamboo forest. He was wearing an ivory robe trimmed with silver thread, as compared to the white dumpling, it was very elegant. He walked to Shen Miao, stopping in front of her as he looked down at her with probing eyes. This youth was very tall as Shen Miao only came up to the height of his chest. There was an unruly laugh on his lips, as if he was looking at a child, but because of his handsome face, it was in no way offensive. If it was an ordinary female, their heartbeat would increase and their ears would have reddened. But Shen Miao, after all, was not a true budding beauty. She glanced at that person and remained silent. The youth's lips hooked up and suddenly there was a sophisticated short sword in his hands. He pointed the scabbard at himself and used sword shaft to lift Shen Miao's chin, forcing her to raise her head. Shen Miao had no choice but to look at the other person. The youth was in his teens, but his brows were exceptionally bright and his eyes were like autumn water, smiling and moving. But the depths of his eyes made others cold and it was a pair of sharp eyes that could almost see into one's heart. This kind of person, even with such a frivolous appearance, would be like a piece of ice inside. She took a deep breath and stepped back so that the shaft of the short sword was away from her chin. She warmly acknowledged, "Little Xie Marquis." Xie Jingxing smiled but his tone was unclear. "You recognize me?" "In the Ding capital, there is no one who does not know little Marquis Xie." Shen Miao lightly said. There seemed to be some sarcasm in the words, but when she said it, it was actually unusually serious, which made others unable to differentiate the tone. "I don't recognize you." Xie Jingxing gave her a glance before looking at the dumpling shivering on the ground. "It was you who let Su Minglang pass the message to the Su family." "Pass the message?" Shen Miao looked at him and suddenly smiled. It was only to teach him a method to avoid getting reprimanded by his father by diverting his attention. How can it be to pass a message? Little Marquis mustn't overthink. Overthink. The youth pondered those words before he suddenly approached in a bullying manner and forced Shen Miao's back to the tree. His expression was ambiguous, but his tone was very clear. "If I did not overthink, I would be deceived by you." Shen Miao frowned. Although there were not too many regulations between males and females in Mingqi, to do such an action in broad daylight would be lacking in manners. In particular, there were so many nobles in Guangwentang and if they were to see this. Well, she did not mind that it would destroy her reputation, but she did care that Shen Xin would then be shamed because of her. In her previous life, because of her, the Shen family collapsed, but it was only after that happened that she was able to see all the care and thought her parents gave. Now, with another lifetime, she would protect her family, so how would she tolerate others mentioning anything bad about the Shen family? Moreover, if it was caused by her. Thinking of that, Shen Miao became somewhat impatient. For little Marquis to attack with condemnations, what is the actual purpose? Xie Jingxin watched the young female before him attentively. He had always been very sensitive to his intuition and was able to see the undercurrent of things beneath the surface. This was how he had lived for the past 10 or so years. To kill others in battle and to fight the treacherous battle under the surface of Ding capital, including the hidden plotting in the back courtyard of his residence. He looked like he grew up just as such, but it was not entirely by luck. There were so many noble children in Mingqi and there were many reasons for their disappearances. He would never take anything for granted. Su Minglang's words, Su Mingfeng would definitely not think there was anything more to it and Master Su would also think that it was an inadvertent reminder from his son. But in his view it was not. To be able to grasp this opportunity so accurately, there were not many coincidences in the world. Most coincidences were man-made. He could conclude that someone had taught Su Minglang to say these words, but for what purpose, he did not know. He planned to meet this person for a while now. When he really met the person behind this, he was actually surprised. Xie Jingxing thought that to be able to come out with such deeply significant words and in Guangwentang, it would be some court official's son, most likely one who would be entering the official circle soon. Perhaps it was to win over the Su family, or perhaps it was to loosen the reins only to grasp them better. But when he saw who it was, he thought that Su Minglang was up to some mischief. It was only when she spoke, then he was sure that he was right. The young female in front of him was not tall and only reached his chest. Her looks were not moving and at most were considered adorable. She looked like an 11-year-old, with a double loop bun on her head, a round face, round eyes, and small lips, standing there like a little lost deer from the forest. But she stood straight and dignified and each spoken word was slowly weighed as if she was taught by the women in the palace. Did she want to be the empress? If he did not see it for himself, Xie Jingxing would have choked on his saliva. Looking up then down, looking left then right, she was just silly little girl. Until she said those words. Her features were childlike but her tone was steady and not even a trace of panic was revealed, but some impatience instead. This was actually a first for little Marquis Xie. When other females saw him coming close they would have long blushed, which was not interesting at all. Most likely she was too young and would not understand anything. But how did she understand the words to give the Su family? One of his hands was placed on the tree trunk behind Shen Miao was. If someone was looking in, it seemed as if he was embracing Shen Miao in an intimate way. Xie Jingxing lowered his head and leaned very closely to Shen Miao. You are not afraid of me. Little Marquis is not a monster who devours people, so what is there to be afraid of? Shen Miao said lightly, if there is nothing else, I will go back to class first. Finishing, she got ready to leave. Stop right there. Xie Jingxing lifted his arms and a piece of Shen Miao's hair slid across his palm making it itch like ants crawling by. He withdrew his hands and took a few steps back to lean against the tree as he folded his arms across his chest, portraying the usual frivolous expression. What is your intention for warning the Su family? His words were like his eyes, which never concealed his sharp approach and direct impulsiveness, yet contained profound meaning. Shen Miao sighed in her heart. Xie Jingxing was even smarter than she had imagined. One sentence from Su Minglang and he ended up here. Not only ending up here, he also questioned the purpose of the words. She only knew that he had a wide perspective from her past life, but from what she saw today, it seemed that he was also someone with penetrating thoughts. How did one hide one's true intentions when dealing with intelligent people? Unfortunately, she never wanted to hide. No other reasons, just for self-preservation. After finishing her words, she gave a slight greeting to Xie Jingxing and turned around to leave without a care for anything else. Xie Jingxin would understand these words. Behind her, the youth's lips hooked up as he played the short sword in his hands. Su Minglang, what is her name? The residence of the Marquis of Lin in Ding capital was indeed magnificent. This was mainly because the Marquis Fern was the Princess Yuqing whom the late emperor doted on most. Originally, once he became a Fuma princess's husband, the Marquis of Lin An's military power must be returned. The late emperor was unable to withstand Princess Yuqing's tantrums and whining, and let things slide. This was enough to show Princess Yuqing's position in the late emperor's heart. Princess Yuqing was an outstanding beauty and had the most gentle and tender temperament. After marrying into the Marquis residence, she was also doted by the Marquis of Linen. Unfortunately the Marquis of Linen still brought in a concubine, who was the current Madame Fang. If Princess Yuqing was a natural lady from a noble house, who had money and power to help one in any occupation, then this Madame Fang was a pretty daughter from a humble family. It was Madame Fang's father who did a favor to the Marquis, and afterwards, when the family fell behind, Father Fang used this favor to compel the Marquis marry Madame Fang as a Liangqi. Liangqi and normal concubines were different and could not be killed as one might wish. In addition, Madame Fang was willing to become a concubine and did not display any jealous behavior, thus the Marquis did not take it to mind. Most likely, it was because noblemen usually had 3 wives and 4 concubines and the Marquis of Linen only brought in 1 Liangqi, which was already rarely seen. As such, the Marquis did not feel that anything was wrong. Unfortunately, when males and females looked at a problem, especially concerning the issue of concubines, they would be poles apart. The Marquis felt that having a Liangji was not a serious matter since a concubine was only a plaything and the person in his heart was still Princess Yuqing, but Princess Yuqing did not feel the same. Princess Yuqing grew up with the favor of the late emperor and was also pampered all day after marrying into the Marquis residence. Her husband had only her, the official wife, so she was already used to that kind of lifestyle. Who knew that there would be a sudden appearance of a concubine? At that time, Princess Yuqing had just given birth to Xie Jingshin and was in her confinement period when she was hit with the news. Madame Fang gave her greeting to Princess Yuqing every day and wore clothes according to the rules. It would be better if she did not come, as it only made Princess Yuqing feel more anguish. If Princess Yuqing was an ordinary princess, she would have found a way to make Madame Fang stumble as it was not impossible to send her away. But Princess Yuqing was protected very well the entire time and was naive to the ways of the world, so how would she know how to use those dirty tricks? Nevertheless, it was the Momo who was part of the princess's dowry who thought of an idea to chase Madame Fang out from the house and carried it out without the princess knowledge. Who knew that it not only ended in failure, but was also discovered by the Marquis of Linen. Even though the Marquis of Linen was usually an unruly person, at the bottom of his heart, he had an honorable temperament and could not stand all the petty little tricks that women played, so he severely rebuked Princess Yuqing at that time. It was the first time since Princess Yuqing married over that she got into an argument with the Marquis of Linen. She was also one who would not swallow any grievances, so she did not mention the matter of the Momo and only opposed the Marquis of Linen with equal harshness, so much so that the Marquis turned and left abruptly. She initially thought that the Marquis of Linen would visit her after a few days, but who knew that after a month had passed, the Marquis only rested at Madame Fang's. A female during confinement period must not be upset and Princess Yuqing kept the anger inside leading her to succumb to a bout of serious illness. Deep down, the Marquis of Linen deeply loved his wife and wanted to visit Princess Yuqing, but on that very night, he received the imperial edict to go into battle and could not even inform Princess Yuqing before he left. Shortly after the Marquis of Linen left, Madame Fang found out she was pregnant. As the main household, when the Marquis was not in, Princess Yuqing could not create problems for Madame Fang and even had to protect the child inside her. If there were any unexpected mishaps, the gossip in the capital would be how she murdered the concubine while her husband was away. Over time, being physically and mentally exhausted, Princess Yuqing's health was gradually neglected and almost at the brink of collapse. When the Momo saw it, she was filled with anxiety, but Princess Yuqing did not allow the Momo to report back to the imperial family. She got up to write a letter to the Marquis of Linen asking him to come back to see her. She waited and waited, but in the end she was unable to wait for the Marquis of Linan's return. Princess Yuqing died. 3 days after the burial, the Marquis of Linen returned in triumph, but upon failing to see his beloved wife, he was deeply grieved. Unfortunately the beauty was gone, leaving behind only a grave. At that time, the late emperor was extremely furious and demoted the official rank of the Marquis of Linen. Until the new emperor took the position and pitied the loss of his talent, he was then promoted back to the Marquis of Linen. Unfortunately, there were no more anecdotes about the ideal couple. The Marquis of Linen did not marry a second wife and there was only Madame Fang in the entire Marquis residence. Madame Fang also lowered her head for more than a decade to be more low profile. Though the Marquis of Linen cared about her children, he put all his energy on his son, Xie Jingxing. But Xie Jingxing did not appreciate it. As he gradually became sensible, he started to become estranged from the Marquis of Linen. Princess Yuqing's and the Marquis of Linan's love-hate disputes were household analogies, thus if one wanted to know about it, it would be known. The Marquis of Linen was conscience-stricken by his son and would always do his best to satisfy him. However, Xie Jingxing especially loved to adopt a confrontational attitude with his father, which made Xie Ding's headache in fury. In any case, he had inherited the beauty and talent of Princess Yuqing and was a wonderful and brilliant gentleman, except for his unruly temper. This naturally made him the ideal man of the young ladies from aristocrat families. Today was still the same. Xie Jingxing strode into his study. His courtyard was the courtyard that Princess Yuqing used to recuperate. It was far from the main courtyard and was very peaceful and secluded. Xie Ding always urged him to move nearer to the main courtyard but was always rejected by his son. The reason was that he did not want to see certain people. His attitude towards the Marquis of Linen had always been so cold. His manservant pushed the door open and came in carrying a snow-white flower ceramic bowl. Fang Yinyang has cooked lotus seed porridge for master to warm his body and said that it has been boiling for a few shichen. He did not like his men to call him young master or heir and had them call him just master. It seemed that with this, he wanted to be separated from the Marquis residence. Xie Jingxing cast a glance at the bowl. The porridge was shimmering and the soup was thick and fresh. It really took a lot of time to make. It was emitting a light fragrance and could move one's appetite. He coldly replied, "Pour it out." The manservant replied yes and withdrew. Just when the servant left, a person suddenly appeared from behind the door. He lowered his head and softly said, "Master, this one has investigated thoroughly. It is the 5th young lady of the first household in the general residence, Shen Shen's daughter, Shen Miao." Shen Shen. Xie Jingxin frowned. Shen Shen and Xie Ding had political differences for many years and the Shen residence and Marquis residence each felt the other was unpleasing to the eye. As for the checks and balances of the military, it involved a lot of interest. The Marquis residence and the Su family were good friends, so for the Shen family to warn the Su family, perhaps it was also to remind the Xie family. But for opposing people to suddenly give a reminder, what was the meaning of it? Even more so, Shen Miao was a little girl, what would she know? It was of course the Shen family who deliberately made her give the reminder. Shen Shen was currently in the faraway northeastern area, could it be the second or third household? Shen Gui and Shen Wan were very ambitious people and now that the situation in the imperial court showed some movement, they might take advantage of the crisis for personal gain. Shen and Xie families are as different as the Jing and Wei rivers. For the Shen girl to suddenly show goodwill, she obviously has ill intentions. He raised his brows as his voice became as cold as iron, continue investigating. Regardless of what kind of turmoil that rose in the capital, or whatever undercurrent that was forming, from the surface there would always be singing and dancing. The annual chrysanthemum banquet was approaching and since Guang Wentang's academy examinations was very close to the chrysanthemum banquet, both events were done together. Unlike previous years, with this, the academy examination had become a big event as all the noble families would attend the banquet. Early in the morning, old Shen Furen sent her maid, Xi'er, to the west courtyard saying that she had invited the tailor for the chrysanthemum banquet clothes and also invited Shen Miao to take a pic. Shen Miao nodded her head in agreement. In previous academy examinations, Shen Miao would wear normally as she usually end up at the bottom so others would laugh if she were to wear something prominent. Now with the combination of the academy examinations and the chrysanthemum banquet, it would not be logical not to make new clothes. During the chrysanthemum banquet, many officials and their Furens would be there, mostly to look for their future daughters-in-law. So for families with daughters, would not only attend but also to dress up to portray their beauty. Even though old Shen Furen did not like the first household, she still have to do it on surface. Moreover for old Shen Furen, who would only look out for her own interest, would definitely use Shen Miao's marriage to exchange for power and may even sell her off. Bai Lu appeared to be somewhat happy as she accompanied Shen Miao towards Rongjingtang, did not expect that the chrysanthemum banquet would be here so soon. Young lady liked the chrysanthemum banquet and at that time, there would be opportunities to enjoy the flowers. Shen Miao liked the chrysanthemum banquet but not because of enjoying the viewing of the flowers. Whenever there is such a banquet, she would be the faintly discernible and would be isolated and that was of course fueled by Shen Yu and Shen Qing. She was also stupid and dull and would not dress appropriately so she would be laughed at without even knowing. She loved the chrysanthemum banquet but it was because of Fu Shuyi. At the chrysanthemum banquet a year ago, Fu Shuyi was also present. At that day she was also being laughed at and alone. The chrysanthemum gardens were filled with beautiful purples and brilliant reds thus everyone went to look for the reddest and brightest while she walked to a corner where she saw a pot of white chrysanthemum. The white chrysanthemum was most likely used during funerals and would naturally not a joyous thing moreover this chrysanthemum blossomed quite miserably. Some of the petals were withered and one would not know if it was the rain or wind that did it, as it stood alone in a corner without anyone's attention. Most likely fellow sufferers empathized with each other. Shen Miao felt that she herself and the chrysanthemum were exactly the same. Just one person all alone, where no one would see. Just as her heart was lamenting, she saw a formal dressed male walking to the front of that chrysanthemum. He reached out to the spray of blossom and gently stroked the petals. The person by his side asked, "Ninth younger brother, this flower is just miserable, what is there nice to look at?" The male smiled, "Pity that it is delicate without anything to depend on." It was this sentence, "pity that it is delicate without anything to depend on," that made Shen Miao have a favorable impression of that man. When that male turned over, she was even more captivated by this handsome appearance. Afterwards Shen Miao learned from the women that was His Majesty's ninth prince, Fu Shuyi. Perhaps there was no reason to why one would to admire another during their youth. Fu Shuyi's words was clearly about the chrysanthemum but she felt that it was empathizing her. She thought that if she were to marry such a gentle person, he would also feel tenderness towards her just like he did to that lonely flower. Unfortunately, it was all her wishful thinking. Fu Shuyi feel tender towards frail flower, feel tender to the entire world, feel tender towards Mei Fern but would never feel tenderness towards her. As for her who gave her everything, from him it was just what a wife's responsibilities was. Those days of mutual respect between spouses were all an act of toleration from Fu Shuyi. He did not really pity the chrysanthemum but only made a casual remark which she then took it for real. Young lady, unwittingly she was lost in thought and did not realize that she had reached the doors of Rongjingtang. Bai Lu quickly called out as a reminder and Shen Miao then followed Shi'er to step inside. Shen Yuanbo was not present today and old Shen Fern was wearing a green and white long embroidered robe. She was already 70 years of age and should not be wearing such a fresh green in color and with that straight and serious face, she looked just like a female ghost. But she herself completely did not realize it. Shen Yu and Shen Qing stood beside their mothers. There was two more Shu daughters in the second household but Ren Wanyun was too strong and overbearing so for such a banquet, she did not allow the Shu daughters to go to steal the limelight. As for the third household, Shen Wan only have a Tongfang other than Chen Ruchu so there was no need to mention of any Shu sons or daughters. So in this way, only the D daughters of each household received the invitation for the chrysanthemum banquet. After Shen Miao greeted old Shen Fern, Ren Wanyun looked at Shen Miao and smiled, "Little five is here. Quickly select the clothing materials. Li Liang will then take the measurements later." Shen Qing giggled, "Second younger sister and me had made our selection and now waiting for you to pick." It was obvious that it was Shi'er who came late but it seemed that it was her fault to make the entire crowd in Rongjingtang wait. Shen Miao could not be bothered to argue with her and walked to the couch where the clothing materials were placed. Li Liang was a 30-plus middle-aged female. Shen residents would purchase all the new clothes from her shop. When she was young she learned some embroidery techniques from the female officials who served in the palace so her clothes were extremely good. There were about 5 or 6 blots of clothes that were spread in front. One begonia and one misty pink color were already placed at a side, obviously chosen by others. Needless to say it was Shen Qing's and Shen Yu's. The previous lifetime scene flashed vividly in her eyes. That day during the chrysanthemum banquet, Shen Qing wore a begonia-colored dress and looked warm and magnanimous which made her more beautiful than the flowers. Shen Yu wore a pink with white embroidered pear flower which made her look delicate and feminine.